Great, thank you. All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Deputy Mayor Jared Neuenhuis. I'd like to welcome you to the Bellevue City Council meeting of January 25th, 2021. The mayor has been temporarily delayed this evening, but will join the meeting shortly. So I will chair the meeting until she arrives. So let's begin. City Clerk, are you ready for the roll call?
Yes, thank you. So as Deputy Mayor said, Mayor Robinson is running late. So with that, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis.
Here.
Councilmember Barksdale.
Here.
Councilmember Lee.
Here.
Councilmember Robertson.
I'm here.
Councilmember Stokes.
Here.
And Councilmember Zahn.
Here.
Perfect, thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Councilmember Lee, would you please lead us in the flag salute?
Thank you. Please, together, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. All right, so tonight we're going to be hearing a report by Fire Chief Hagan on the mobile vaccination team and a recent ILA that was signed. So we will add the item as 7B on our agenda. So in regards to approval of the agenda, do I have a motion to amend the agenda and add this item under the report of the city manager?
I move
So
to
moved.
agenda.
Second.
Okay, all those say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that is approved. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to oral communication. City Clerk, are there any speakers signed up to provide oral communications this evening?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. There are 3 speakers this evening. And with that, I will call the first speaker, and that is Chris Cole. Mr. Cole, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
Thank you. Good evening, Deputy Mayor and members of the council. It's a real pleasure to be here this evening. My name is Chris Cole. I'm here on behalf of the Crossroads Shopping Center to speak in support for the developer agreement that's before you this evening. I've spent 30 years working on Crossroads, 20 of it with Ron Schur and his group, and the past 10 years with ROIC. And even though the partnerships may have changed, the whole philosophy has always been the same. Make sure that Crossroads feels like a community gathering space. We were involved in the initial collaboration with the city and the community on the Crossroads sub-area plan. And really those were early days when we were talking about residential going in the shopping center and blurring the park line between the city park and the shopping center. Since that time, we've implemented some of those plans, adding some park connections, and most recently 185 senior housing units to the north side of Regal Cinemas. None of that could have been done without our collaboration with the city and the city staff. The support and the comments over the 30 years has been really helpful in us seeing the vision. The developer agreement before you this evening has 225 residential units, about 14,000 square feet of retail, parking that's both surface and structured, and most importantly, an extended park connection into the shopping center, as well as increased pedestrian access, stronger pedestrian access, both to Northeast 8th, 156th, and within the shopping center. And as part of the park connection within the shopping center, we worked with the city, not just city staff and planners, but encouraged to work with the mini city hall and also with the parks department to put a survey out to the community. And the developer agreement that you have before you this evening is exactly that. It's the community, what the community wanted to see programmed on the park extension. We're really proud of all the way we all work together, city staff, ourselves, and the community input. And we thank you for your input on the developer agreement this evening and look forward to hearing any comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker this evening is Mark Taylor. Mr. Taylor, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
Okay. Thank you very much. I will keep my comments very brief. I'm Mark Taylor with MG2 Architects. I have been working with Chris Cole on the Crossroads projects for about 4 years. And I'm really just here to represent the design, I'll lead the design team for the project, and just here to help support and answer any questions that may come up in the discussion of the project. So I will leave it at that and give you back that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. The next speaker is Jessica Claussen. Ms. Claussen, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear
Thank
me?
you. Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
Great. Hi, everybody, council members. My name is Jessica Claussen. I'm with McCullough Hill Leary. We're the land use council for this project and have been involved specifically with putting together this development agreement with the city. I just wanted to remind the council that, sorry, I don't know how many years ago it was. I feel like time is a construct, but the council did pass the Crossroads sub-area plan, which does permit a limited number of residential units in the Crossroads sub-area. And this proposal and this development agreement specifically satisfies all of the criteria that are required to be met in order for multifamily development to be placed in the Crossroads sub-area. So you guys put together a plan, we're achieving the plan, and we're really excited to provide the public benefits and the needed multifamily density in this area to support the shopping center. And then we're here later if staff ever has any questions. We'll still be on the line as you discuss this. Thanks.
Thank you. That was the end of our pre-registered speaker list. That also was 3 comments in support of the development agreement. So at this point, I would ask if there's anyone else connected to this call who would like to make oral communications to the council on a topic other than support of the development agreement. If so, please use the raise hand function or *9 if you are connected with a phone. Deputy Mayor, I see 2 hands raised, and I saw Betsy Hummer first. Ms. Hummer, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me this time?
Yes, thank you, Betsy.
Oh,
your time, yes, your time begins now.
Okay, good. So I am commenting on, I had it opened here. I'm looking forward to tonight's council presentation from the King County Metro Transit. I hope our city council has good questions for the transit rep, especially since many of the affordable housing strategy incentives are tied to frequent transit. And these affordable housing strategies were developed in 2017, and they are just being addressed now by the Planning Commission. They'll be voted on recommended by the Planning Commission to City Council and then East Bellevue Community Council. Bellevue is lucky to have Councilmember Robertson as a city representative to the Regional Transit Committee. I am sure her far-sighted, pragmatic input on transit issues is appreciated. I am surprised that tonight a report from Sound Transit is not being presented at the same time. It would be informative to see how Sound Transit is handling ridership impacted by COVID, especially since there is a certain amount of overlap among the commuter routes to downtown Seattle. The Sound Transit 550, 540, and 554 run regularly, even when, say, the 218 and 111 metro routes are compromised. I hope to hear how much Bellevue contributes to the transit funding and how those dollars are parceled out to various jurisdictions. I noted that the routes serving Enetai and Lakemont are suspended. My niece had been able to take the 249 from Clarny Glen Park to her job at the Pro Club. It is too bad she would have to rely on single vehicle to get there now. It seems to indicate to me that there is room for increased affordable housing in those neighborhoods to take advantage of the light rail, the proximity to I-90, and the dependable 550 and 554 routes. The trip reductions will impact the frequency of transit on which the affordable housing strategy C5 depends. I hope the Planning Commission takes this into consideration over the next few study sessions. It seems to indicate reduced parking as an incentive for increased affordable units should be located closer to the transit nodes near light rail and not in the less serviced neighborhoods such as Crossroads and Lake Hills. The only permit applicant that has taken advantage of the C5 interim official control seems to be the Eastgate Men's Shelter. The shelter is served by one bus route, the 240, that meanders from Renton through Newport Hills, Bellevue College, and that was only negotiated a few years ago, and eventually ends up in downtown Bellevue. The Eastgate Transit Center is nearly a mile away from the shelter and requires a hike of 200 feet in elevation gain. It seems like regional assets like the shelter would qualify for improved transit throughout the city of Bellevue. I appreciate you listening to my comments, and I look forward to this meeting tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hummer. The next hand that I see raised and the final hand raised is David Hoffman. Mr. Hoffman, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
All right. Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhouse, council members, City Manager Miyake, city staff, and Bellevue residents. My name is David Hoffman. I represent Puget Sound Energy, and I'm here tonight to share an exciting announcement. Puget Sound Energy has set an aspirational goal to be a beyond net zero carbon company by 2045. This means that PSE will target reducing our own carbon emissions to net zero and go beyond that by helping other sectors enable carbon reduction across the state of Washington. PSE has a critical interest and important role in achieving a sustainable future and limiting widespread impacts of climate change. We must shift from what is practical, convenient, or easy to climate action that is both grounded in the latest science and ambitious enough in speed and scale to transition to a more sustainable economy for ourselves, our customers, and society. This ambitious target has three pathways: operations and electric supply, natural gas sales, and beyond PSE reported carbon emissions. Here's what that means. In operations and electrical supply, PSE's electrical supply will have net zero carbon emissions by 2030 and will be 100% carbon free by 2045. Beyond that, PSE's electric and gas operations will be net zero by 2030. On natural gas sales, we've set aspirational goals to reduce emissions from customer use of natural gas by 30% by the year 2030, and to reach net zero carbon emissions for natural gas sales by 2045, meaning net zero emissions for customer use of natural gas at home or at your business. And in the beyond PSE reported carbon emissions section, at PSE, we know we can't do everything necessary to meet the challenge of climate change ourselves, but we can help unlock the potential that lay with other economic sectors. That's our third pathway: partnering with customers and industry to identify programs and products that cost effectively reduce carbon across sectors and across our region and state. This means transportation electrification, supporting low carbon fuels, expanding the capture and use of renewable natural gas, and fulfilling our commitment to zero net methane leaks from our natural gas distribution system by next year, just to name a few. A critical component to achieving this goal will be balancing clean energy goals with customer expectations for uncompromised reliability, safety, and affordability. PSE is also committed to ensuring that all customers and communities have access to and benefit from the transition to a clean energy future. We know these issues are extremely complex. PSE will be convening an external advisory committee with representation from a diverse set of community members, partners, technical experts, and others. We look forward to continuing our excellent and decades-long partnership with the City of Bellevue to meet these incredible goals. Thank you for your time this evening and your support as we work to achieve these goals. Good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. And Deputy Mayor, that is now the end of the list. And I will note as well, the mayor has now joined the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate, Deputy Mayor, you taking over the meeting for me while I was gone. Really appreciate that. Good evening, everybody. I'm happy to be here. I think we're on to the report of the city manager now. I don't hear you yet.
That's because I had to unmute myself. I apologize. Good evening, Mayor Robinson and council members. I have 2 items under the city manager's report for you this evening, both related to how the city has responded to COVID. The first one is how we've conducted the environmental outreach during the COVID environment. And just by way of background, when in-person outreach and events were canceled for the majority of 2020, the utilities department had to rethink, how to offer environmental outreach and education services during COVID-19. Joining this evening are Naval Toll, the utilities director, and Aaron Hislop, our conservation and outreach program administrator, to provide the council with an overview on how the utilities department modified its outreach strategies during this time of COVID. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to utilities director Naval Toll. Nav?
Thank you, Mr. Miyake. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newenhouse, and council members. Like many businesses, COVID-19 has impacted Bellevue Utilities operations in a number of ways and in all of our operational areas. And we had to quickly adapt our service strategy so that we could continue to serve the community. Tonight, we are here to brief you on one of these areas, as Brad mentioned, that is how we adapted our environmental outreach services to serve our customers in the COVID environment. Tonight's focus is primarily on solid waste programs. And as a reminder, water conservation and outreach programs are provided by Cascade. We are not looking for direction tonight. This is an informational briefing. To support the city's waste diversion goals, Bellevue Utilities provides outreach, education, and technical assistance to residents, businesses, and students on waste prevention, recycling, composting, and household hazardous waste. I think we've lost our slideshow. Due to COVID, in-person diversion goals, okay, we're there. Due to COVID-19, in-person outreach was canceled for majority of 2020. We had to quickly rethink how we were going to offer our outreach and education programs so that we could continue to share key environmental messages in a manner that meets the community's changing needs. I would now like to turn it over to Aaron Hislop, our conservation and outreach administrator, to share with you how we shifted our outreach efforts to accomplish this.
Thank you so much, Nav. Can everybody hear me? Excellent. Yes. So this is just our quick overall agenda, and I'm actually going to just dive right in and start with how we have reached residents this past year. So starting with our community workshops, our existing community workshops, we began offering those virtually in partnership with the King County Library System. We were able to expand our class options to add 5 new classes, including classes on reducing single-use plastics, reducing food waste, classes on how to successfully set up composting with a focus specifically on multifamily properties. And we also added classes on responsible reorganizing and sustainable shopping, both of which fit pretty well with the increase in online shopping and home decluttering that was occurring during the pandemic. Overall, we were able to provide a total of 20 virtual classes during the pandemic last year, with a total of 417 attendees who gave us very positive feedback. In lieu of in-person events, we were able to provide some curbside pickup opportunities for our residents as well. So just to give you an example, we partnered with the HopeLink mobile market, which is what you see in the photo, to offer conservation kits in both English and Spanish to over 100 households that came to pick up food for their families. Given the large amount of online shopping, home deliveries, eating more at home, we shifted the tools we were offering in our kits to include items such as food waste reduction tips. We have bladeless box cutters made from recycled content that help flatten cardboard boxes for recycling, and of course, information on how to recycle right. We also sought out several different creative partnerships. So to give you a couple of examples, in October, we partnered with the Goose Chase phone app to offer a citywide scavenger hunt for the first time. Utilities included conservation-related challenges that could be done at home. We had 101 players participate overall and gave really positive feedback afterwards. Many of the players are already requesting that we offer the service again in the future. We also partnered with the local Bellevue and Crossroads farmers markets to hand out tools and information to over 1,200 households that were waiting in kind of socially distant lines to make their purchases. We partnered with the Bellevue Art Museum to include zero waste crafts that were picked up by over 700 families during their Curbside Halloween event. And we also partnered with our local library staff to distribute zero waste winter holiday information through their new Curbside to Go library program. What's specifically thinking about multifamily properties, we worked really closely with property managers to determine what they would find most useful for their residents during this time. So using their input, we provided contactless deliveries of supplies to help residents successfully recycle and compost right. Materials were things like signage, recycling tote bags, kitchen food scrap containers, sample kitchen approved compost bags, those bladeless box cutters, and then of course, recycling guides. And in-person and obviously door-to-door education hasn't been possible during COVID. So we did begin offering some virtual presentations, and we've partnered with property managers, emailing them tips and flyers that they can then distribute to their residents as well. In addition, since food waste was increasing while residents are eating at home more often during the pandemic, and many multifamily properties didn't have commercial compost collection, we obtained a list from Republic Services of all the multifamily properties without compost service, and we cross-checked who we believe has been recycling well to our knowledge, and then we began some targeted outreach to those property managers to offer assistance with setting up compost service for the first time for their residents. To avoid contamination, we worked with property owners to stencil and paint new compost collection areas that would clearly stand out as different than garbage or recycling. We provided large posters and cart signage on what belongs in those new compost carts. Just to give you a couple examples, the photos you see on the left is Hampton Greens, which is a low-income property that now diverts about 800 pounds of food scraps and pizza boxes each month. And on the right is AMLI, which is a brand new multifamily complex in the Spring District that worked with us to successfully launch composting and recycling as part of their grand opening. We also provided utilities welcome kits to every new household in that complex to kind of help set the conservation tone and expectations as they were moving in. And then in honor of America Recycles Day, which happens in November, we created a zero waste challenge at home for youth living in multifamily properties. So we worked with 225 households at 6 multifamily properties, and youth at each of those households received a zero waste pledge and then tools to help teach their families how to recycle right. This helped us reach families in multifamily properties in a new way, and it also served as a replacement for our usual annual school cafeteria zero waste challenge, which was canceled this year since schools were closed. Facilities were anyway. So thinking about businesses, despite the pandemic, our support for businesses really did continue throughout 2020. Overall, 67 businesses in Bellevue received some level of assistance from the city on waste reduction and recycling. So given the impacts of the pandemic on our businesses, we really wanted to be really sensitive in our approach. So we reached out to the business owners we already have relationships with to determine how would they be willing to partner with us during this unique time. I'm really proud to share that despite the challenges during the pandemic, we found that Bellevue businesses really are still committed to sustainability. So using their input, we began by focusing our assistance largely on cost-saving measures first. So for example, we offered to help businesses right-size dumpsters and service levels to match their current waste generation, and also to come audit their current waste streams to try to divert more volume away from their garbage and therefore save costs. We also provided virtual staff lunch and learns for companies that wanted to plan for the future and or that wanted to boost staff morale with a positive training. So the picture you see on the upper left there is the partners group receiving a recycling and composting at work interactive Zoom presentation. And then upon request, we did provide contactless delivery of materials, things like signage and color-coded sort containers. For some of our larger waste generators that have more unique waste streams, we also created some tailored and city co-branded signage just to help them promote recycling more and recycling right. So we also began exploring opportunities to assist our food generating businesses, so our grocers and our restaurants, with increased composting and or food recovery efforts. I'm really happy to say we've been in kind of a relationship building phase, and now several of our independent grocery stores have expressed interest in working with us to expand those efforts once the pressures by COVID-19 have alleviated a bit. And then several restaurants chose to work with us immediately to implement food scrap collection for the first time. The photo we see here is I Love Pho restaurant owner receiving supplies from us as they launched Compost Collection with the city's assistance. And I can tell you Afghan Cuisine and Lishu Hot Pot are additional examples of restaurants that have just recently begun composting for the first time. And then I don't want to leave out, of course, our fabulous schools and youth in Bellevue. We revised our in-person classroom workshops to offer live virtual presentations in teachers' distance learning classrooms. In addition, we also created some supplemental curriculum for teachers to use with students, including things like pre-recorded mini PowerPoint video lessons with electronic student worksheets, online Kahoot trivia quizzes, and then classroom video kind of warm-up games. The pictures you see here is an example of our youngest school age youth workshop for kindergarten and first grade. We provide a theatrical storytelling program where the presenter enters the virtual classroom in character as Mother Earth, and students learn about the 4 R's, reduce, reuse, recycle, rethink. And then an example of an older student lesson is our hazards on the home front, which has been really well received, and teachers are actually reporting using all the supplemental curriculum pieces as well, which is great. I'll throw out there that we also just recently piloted a new workshop on recycling in Spanish for our dual language and our immersion classes too. So overall, we taught live in over 60 remote classrooms this fall. And I am just so happy to say that teachers inviting us into their remote classrooms during such a hectic time, I think really shows the trust and the value that they have in our city educators and our curriculum. So that's been really a positive experience. We also did create at-home youth activity guides for each of our classroom lessons that extends the learning to youth at home, and it encourages more interaction on these topics with their families as well. So these guides will act as a follow-up workbook to our in-person workshops in the future, so we'll keep using those too. And then I do just want to say that we really want zero waste and conservation efforts to be part of our new normal, even after the pandemic. So the outreach team saw this as a time, just an opportunity really, to think about what gaps exist that we could start to fill in behind the scenes for the future. So to give you a couple of brief examples, the city's special events user manual will now include a detailed zero waste events guide that we created for event organizers. And another example is the Bellevue School District has worked with us to utilize grant funds to install reusable water bottle refilling stations in 5 of the school facilities. We've obtained outdoor recycling containers to pair with the garbage cans at secondary school stadiums. And we have worked with nutrition services to purchase reusable utensils and supplies to eliminate all disposable utensils in all of their school cafeterias in the future. So that's a really big commitment by the school district to say that our new normal after the pandemic will not continue to include a lot of single-use disposables. So just in summary, I think reworking our programs during the COVID environment has helped the city not only maintain a service continuity, but also meet some pretty dynamic and changing needs and find some new creative opportunities to improve our delivery and honestly to protect the environment, hopefully long into the future. So at this time, that's it from me, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I think you're muted, Mayor.
Mayor, you're muted right now.
I thought you were all riveted on what I was saying. If anybody has any questions or comments, you can raise your hand and I can see you. Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, first of all, Erin, I love your energy. I think that making it fun, making it positive is really important. And I've actually attended some of the zero waste workshops that we did through the county or with the library system. My question when you were talking about the zero waste guide is that my hope is as the city's events reopen, that we're doing the same thing when we have our activities, that we're using compostable silverware and we have a lot of single-use plastic bottles. So to the degree we can look at how we transition our own staff to other things, I think that would be really helpful as our new normal. And then the other one I was thinking about is with all of the takeout, to the degree that we can also help the businesses move away from, you know, I know that when I get takeout from our local restaurants, some are using compostable packaging. Some are still using a lot of styrofoam and plastic that are just waste. And so I'd like to understand a bit more about how we help the businesses transition to that, especially since they may have a lot of inventory that's not compostable. Do we have some programs to incentivize or help them make that transition? Because I'm concerned about how much of that waste is currently in lots of households.
Yeah, thank you so much. I completely agree. And it's actually been a pretty big shift during the pandemic that we're seeing a lot more condiment packets and single-use utensils, all those things you said. So post-pandemic, most of those places do plan to return to something more sustainable. Right now, they're trying to follow public health guidelines and be as safe as possible and make sure their customers feel comfortable. And so it's generally a conversation about safety and also just the perceptions of safety around some of those items as well. We definitely will help any business start to look at kind of the cost analysis of it. I think that's a starting point particularly during economic recovery, what's going to be feasible over this next year or so, just looking at the costs of various things. And I think there are a lot of options out there. We are also, as part of our outreach programs, when we look at what kind of behavior change incentives we're giving away, we are giving away reusable utensil kits and reusable straws, et cetera, that people, and encouraging them to leave them in their car and to opt out of getting disposables when they get their takeout in the meantime as well. So small steps there. And I do know there are some statewide efforts to start to kind of change things up the stream a little bit so that some of those things aren't going to be possible probably in the future.
Okay, yeah, that would be great. I certainly seem to get an inordinate amount of styrofoam packaging with my food for takeout. So thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Councilmember Stokes.
Councilmember Stokes, you're muted at the moment.
Thank you. Have to be more determinative on the hitting than mute. I just wanted to thank you very much and thank the agency or the utility for working with Cascade Water Alliance on this. And a lot of the cities are doing this, but I have to say I'm very proud of the fact that we're doing a great job. And I think it's been very helpful, and we're running across some of the same things you're talking about in terms of water usage and wastewater and all. And we have between us a very, very good comprehensive program and working on the same goals. So just wanted to mention that. And thank you very much for both your enthusiasm and the substance of the report. Sounds like we're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Aaron, I love when you said you want zero waste events to be part of the norm. I want zero waste to be part of the norm. So all this work is moving toward that. I see you, Councilmember Lee. And I think, going off of what Councilmember Zahn said, it'd be great if when we have the bandwidth for you to partner with our ED department and see how we can team up to help our small businesses work toward a more compostable future. Thank you. Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As you probably know, we are all very committed, dedicated to waste reduction. We just heard from PSC, toward the carbon neutral, net zero energy carbon production. I think, what I want to comment is I want to compliment our city departments, such as, what you guys are doing during the COVID-19. You don't just sit there and say, well, gee, we cannot do anything. Just sit around, but you are being very creative. You're doing things, working with the schools, with the kids, working with the multifamily homes. I think these are the things that not just making sure that we are doing things to help the community during COVID-19, not just being paralyzed, but the thing you do actually is going to benefit even after COVID-19, because these are the things you probably normally don't even think about when you're so busy, doing this and that. But now I think you have, I don't know what you call extra time or not, but it gives you opportunity to really come up with some real good, innovative, creative ideas, and which can continue and make the waste reduction even more, more realistic, more easy to accomplish toward our goal. So well done, good job.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Miyake, what is our next topic?
Sure, thank you, Mayor and Council members. As the Deputy Mayor alluded to, we added a second topic, and this is with respect to how we've responded to the pandemic. This is a good news story on how Bellevue's fire department is assisting in the administration of the COVID vaccine in adult family homes located in Bellevue. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Hagan to provide the council with an overview of just what role that the Bellevue Fire Department has played. Chief?
Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhaus, City Manager Miyake, and members of council. Thank you for the opportunity to present this evening. If it's okay, I'll go ahead and share my screen. And can you see the
Yes.
presentation up there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, very good. Again, thank you for the opportunity this evening to present on our vaccination efforts. And the nature of the presentation this evening is simply informational, an opportunity to update council on the coronavirus mobile vaccination pilot program. The Bellevue Fire Department is participating in a pilot program to field mobile vaccination teams in our community. Adult family homes are defined as being a licensed care facility located in a residential setting, usually having about 6 to 10 residents and about as many staff. The residents there have varying abilities. Some residents are non-ambulatory. These adult family homes and the folks that live there represent some of our most fragile residents. There, of the 140 adult family homes in our service area, there are 93 that need a mobile vaccination team to aid their residents and staff with vaccinations. The balance of that number have already signed up with a Department of Health pharmacy program, either through CVS or Walgreens. I'd like to share with you this timeline that shows about 9 days from idea to starting this program. Public Health has offered both Bellevue and Puget Sound Fire departments an opportunity to pilot these mobile vaccination teams. And we are doing this on our ALS footprint, or larger than just the city of Bellevue, the area in which we provide advanced life support services. You'll see here that on January 17th, we were hosted by the Seattle Fire Department, who's a little bit ahead of us. And we had a small group of firefighters and EMTs ride along with their program, observe what they were doing, and they taught us some of their skills and methods, and we brought those home here to Bellevue. We formed a task force on January 19th, and our first vaccine dosage was delivered on January 21st. And that day, we were shadowed by members from Public Health, Seattle, King County, who were observing us to make sure that we were doing everything the right way. We started training vaccinators on January 22nd, and today, in earnest, we launched our formal program. And we also, at this point, have a countersigned agreement with King County as the vaccinating agency and us supporting them under that arrangement. Some of the key factors involve, we want to get as many adult family home residents as we can in the first month, get everybody we can, and then we have to cycle back and repeat and give everybody their second dose. The supply chain and the availability of vaccine will impact our progress. You may have read in the media that the supply of vaccine has been a little bit unsure, and we're finding that to be true. the advance notice we get to receive vaccine is also very limited. Now we learn on a Friday what will be available the following Monday. So we have to be really careful about our scheduling. And I'd also like to let you know that our mobile vaccination teams are comprised of our EMT and paramedics. And so we're able to handle any adverse reaction to the vaccine or any medical emergency that occurs while we're there on site. We'll be able to handle, or we will call in the additional help to handle it. And we are giving the Moderna brand of the vaccine. Regarding some of the challenges we anticipate facing, mobile in the mobile teams means literally that. We are going room to room in some case. Today was a nice day, and we were able to gather some of the residents on an outdoor deck and give vaccinations in that environment. In other cases, residents are confined to their bedroom, and we're having to go room to room to do that. And we will, that's not a problem, but we will use a little more PPE because we have to put on a clean set for each new environment. Regarding language challenges, we do use Language Line, which is a telephonic service that we use to get interpretation services quickly to somebody that we're having a difficulty understanding. We're a little bit ahead of an online documentation system. So we are doing our paperwork by hand. We're bringing it back to the station in the evening and inputting it later in the day. So we're anxiously awaiting an online software platform that the county will be using countywide. I mentioned a little bit about the vaccine availability, which will indicate how many teams we can field on any given day and our ultimate speed to the end. But we are going to have enough vaccine to work every day we possibly can. And we imagine having a minimum of one team out there every day. Another thing that we figured out is if we contact these adult family home administrators in advance and send them the paperwork, that helps us speed up our process. So we're pretty excited about that. This is an opportunity for the Bellevue Fire Department to really demonstrate regional leadership. And I mentioned our ALS footprint. What that means is that we provide paramedic and advanced life support services from Mercer Island all the way to Snoqualmie Pass and from Newcastle to Redmond and everywhere in that border. And so we're partnering with our neighbors to make sure that our adult family homes are covered, but also theirs as well. So that's the area in which we will be working. So our goal is to address all 93 adult family homes within 28 days, get that all handled, and then go back when the timing is right. It's usually about 3 to 4 weeks between doses, and give everybody their second dose. I'm told by my team that we have vaccinated 98 individuals and we intend to break 100 tomorrow. We've covered about 10 of the over 90 adult family homes on our list. And regarding priority, I wanted to share with you that we pick up a blue cooler, like you can see in the photo, that has the vaccine in it. We pick it up every morning in downtown Seattle, and we have to return it in the evening because the medicine is temperature controlled. It doesn't live very long outside of a refrigerator. So we're scheduling adult family homes in clusters that are located proximal to each other so we can get as much work done, keep our medicine cold, and get it checked back in the evening. And that's called chain of custody of the medicine. We also have to do that with other medications that we give. So that's not new or a surprise. And in the picture, you see 4 of our folks and the vaccination bag that we check out daily. Regarding how these teams are staffed, I just wanted to share with you that one mobile vaccination team is 1 vaccinator and 2 support technicians, because as you can imagine, giving the shots goes pretty quickly, and that's something we do a lot. Prepping our patients, speaking with them, monitoring them after their vaccination, and taking care of the paperwork is really what takes a little bit more of the time. So we're partnering 1 vaccinator with 2 techs. One team can cover about 3 adult family homes in a day. And with our limited experience thus far, we're finding that we're able to move a little more quickly than we thought. So we're really encouraged by that. And if we have vaccine availability, we're prepared to deploy up to 2 to 4 teams daily. But really, again, I need to accentuate that's dependent on the availability of the vaccine. And so we're going to be deploying one team per day in the coming days until we see how that vaccine availability shows up for us. This next slide is a little bit busy, and I don't expect you to read every word, but I just want to share with you, Mayor and Council, about the tremendous effort and teamwork that we've had over the last 9 days, from Mayor Robinson calling me and saying, "Hey, Chief, how fast can we get this rolling?" to people being vaccinated. Michelle Plord, the Director of King County Medic 1, has been extremely helpful. Our City Attorney's Office staff in assisting with getting the proper agreements in place. Our Human Resources in helping me with labor agreements to get all this work staffed. Dr. Tom Ray, who is our County Medical Director. Dr. James Bull, who is our Fire Department Medical Director at Overlake. My peers in the King County Fire Chiefs, Local 1604 President Oltman, Amy Warrior, and Deborah Schweiker, who are key individuals helping us plan this work. And also I'd like to mention my EMS commander, Battalion Chief Chuck Heights, who's done a tremendous job of answering the call. You know, I told him I need this done as fast as possible, and he's just done a tremendous job of bringing all these entities together to get us moving. On this next slide, if I can get my cursor over there. While you're taking a look at the champions page, in closing, I wanted to share with you that I spoke with a woman today whose husband was vaccinated this morning by our mobile team. And she had been on the phone for a couple weeks trying to arrange this. Her name is Sally Joe. Her husband's name is Augie. And Augie's 77 years old. He lives in an adult family home in Bellevue. Sally Joe describes herself as a pit bull on behalf of taking action for her loved ones. Sally Joe cared for Augie for many years in their home where they lived together. Over time, as Augie's needs for medical care increased, they had an in-home service come to their home and help them part-time for several years. As more time passed, it just got to be too much for them, and Augie needed 24/7 care. About 3 years ago, they transitioned Augie into an adult family home in Bellevue. And that setting has really been working well for them. Sally Joe shared with me today a little bit about their experience with our vaccination pilot and what it means to them. She described our crews on scene as being competent, caring, and kind. And I'm not at all surprised to hear that. After our conversation, we closed by her sharing with me the feeling of hope they have that with his vaccination and hers being scheduled early next month, she's so looking forward to being able to resume their in-person visits as soon as possible. So I learned that this protection, this hope that the vaccine offers is really important to so many of the vulnerable in our community. And we in the fire department and EMS community feel so fortunate to be part of it. Excuse me. With that, Mayor Robinson, I'm happy to take any questions or comments you may have.
Thank you, Chief Hagan. You know, this population is near my heart, and it's just outstanding to think that, you know, after being on a phone call with the Department of Health and hearing about the possibility of you partnering with the county to do something like this, how quickly you organized and rolled this out, and that you're already out there making great progress. It's so gratifying. You talk about the Bellevue Way. This to me just is emblematic of the Bellevue Way. So thank you. Thank you so much. Are there any questions? Okay, hold on. There we go. So I just see, okay, I see Councilmember Lee, Deputy Mayor Newhouse, Councilmember Zahn. Did I miss anybody? Okay, go ahead. Oh, and Councilmember Stokes, I think. So Councilmember Lee, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It was so wonderful that our fire department and firefighters and Chief Hagan is so, mindful of what we can do in such a, scary pandemic. And we have a solution now with the vaccine. And the key now is to get to people's arms. So what are you doing really helps a lot of folks. And I, recognizing I've been, one of those who are, trying to get the vaccination. And I sent an email to Chief Hagan a week ago, and he responded immediately. I suggested a lot of people don't know where they can go. They are trying to find a lot of vaccination places. We all know that it's it's hard to schedule, many places. So we need to have more space and more people who can do the vaccination and more availability and all that. So I thought, quickly, people need to have lots of more options and to do this. So I asked maybe all the fire stations can be a place where people can go. And obviously there are a lot of challenges, details you have to work out. But with what you have done, you really are already preparing our personnel to be able to provide that. And you know how to handle it, and you train, you equip. So I think I would suggest the next step to do would be, having the fire stations be open, available, and people can consider that as an additional available place and a vaccination opportunity. I think that would be a tremendous value for people in the neighborhoods everywhere in the city of Bellevue. Thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Newhouse.
Thank you, Mayor. And yes, fantastic presentation by Chief Hagan there, and great to see how quickly, as the Mayor mentioned, what a great example of the Bellevue way. And thank you, Mayor, for your leadership. And thank you, Chief Hagan, for moving so quickly on this. It's just outstanding that we could potentially cover all 93 adult family homes within 2 months if you have the appropriate amount of supply. So fantastic. My quick question for you, Chief Hagan, is can we, continue to move forward with this pilot program beyond adult family homes? I'm not sure that we have the budget or the ability to do that, but I can think of other centers, be it childcare centers or schools, perhaps educators, that perhaps we could get the vaccine out there just as quickly.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Newhouse, for that question and that observation. During our initial discussions with King County, and again, they are the vaccinating agency and we are acting as their agent, they described 2 areas where they thought we might be particularly useful. One, where we're beginning, is the mobile vaccination teams focused on our adult family homes. Second is the proliferation of high volume drive-through centers. As you're probably aware, we also have been participating in drive-through centers for testing in other parts of the county. There has been some discussion about migrating those centers from testing to vaccination and creating new ones. So we are a great place to deposit suggestions and observations about that. And we're happy to funnel those on to King County. And we're really squarely focused on the work we have before us right now, but we do anticipate being asked to do even more as this pilot progresses.
Great, thanks, Chief Hagan.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Zahn.
Yeah, so I echo my colleagues and thank you, Chief, for moving so quickly. It's amazing what we can do when we roll up our sleeve and work together regionally. My question is, you talked a bit about the regional reach beyond Bellevue. So when you were talking about the 93 adult family homes, is that only in Bellevue or did that already include the broader East King County area?
Thank you, Councilmember Zahn. And I'm sorry, I could have been more clear on that. There are 140 adult family homes in our service area. And as you're aware, we also provide a service to 6 contract cities around us. And our ALS footprint involves the other cities that I mentioned in East King County. Redmond is an ALS provider, as is Shoreline. So we sort of raised our hand and agreed to go first, and we're going to learn how to do this. We're going to help our neighboring communities, and they are already, for example, we had Eastside Fire and Rescue riding with us today to sort of learn how to do it, learn the ropes, and then start going in their area. And we anticipate participating with and training other jurisdictions here in the coming days. So the 93 is the balance of the 140 that wasn't previously enrolled in the federal pharmacy program. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you. And I would say the other one is, so the providers themselves that are in the adult family homes, will they also get vaccinated, or were they part of 1A and would already have been vaccinated?
Thank you. Another great question. I'm sorry I didn't clarify that. We are vaccinating the adult family home residents and the staff at the same time. And we find that usually an average number might be 8 patients and 6 to 8 staff, as many as 10. So we're going in with enough supplies and vaccine to vaccinate the residents and the staff, and then we will return on round 2, catching up with those same individuals. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's great. It makes the most sense, because sometimes when we try to segregate into only certain populations, it doesn't really address the exposure holistically. So thank you very much.
Councilmember Stokes. I'm having trouble hearing you, Councilmember Stokes. Councilmember Stokes, I still can't hear you.
Well, I know. I should just leave it on. I just want to say, add my thanks and congratulations, having experienced the wonderful assistance that the fire department gives to people who need it and help. I'm not surprised, but it's just amazing what you've done, and we all really appreciate that. And I would, it's very difficult for people who are in this other category to find places. And so, if there are ways to expand that, that would be great. But I know you have a lot of other work to do. So just appreciate so much. And thanks for the presentation. And I'm going to just keep on going. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Hagan. Keep up the great work, please. Okay, I think we're moving on to the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, great. So we're on to our study session items. We have 4 items, I believe. Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce the first one?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council members. And the first one is a briefing on the King County Metro Transit Policy. Tonight, we're joined by Terry White, the new General Manager of King County Metro Transit, who will provide an update on the temporary service reductions and related changes as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. White will also brief the council on changes to Metro Transit's policies for adding and reducing transit service. Tonight's presentation is informational to provide the council with the latest information. No action is being required from the council this evening. This is just an opportunity to learn about Metro's policies and practices, and an opportunity for the council to ask questions and to provide some feedback. With that, I'd like to welcome Terry White and then turn this over to Joyce Nichols, our Director of Intergovernmental Relations. Joyce?
Thank you, Brad. Brad said it all during his intro. I want to introduce the folks that are here tonight from Metro, including Terry White, who's the recently appointed General Manager of Metro. We also have Policy Lead Tessa McClellan and Service Planning Lead Brian Henry. And from Bellevue tonight, we have our Transportation Director, Andrew Singalakis, and Lacey Jane Wolf, who's our Policy Advisor in Transportation. And again, no council action tonight. I will dispense with my background remarks because Terry White graciously changed his calendar so he could stay a bit longer into the meeting. So I'm just going to let him take it over from there. Thank you. Terry?
Thanks, Joyce. Can you all hear me? All right. Really, Joyce, and thank you all for this opportunity to meet with you, to share and engage with you on what we believe is a very important topic. As mentioned, I am Terry White, King County's new General Manager. I've been with King County Metro for 34 years now. And I've served in really over a dozen different positions. My view on transit is transit has been changing lives for decades, perhaps unintentional, but it has been changing them nonetheless. At Metro, we speak to where needs are greatest and work in support of priority populations. We define priority populations in 5 groupings: Black, Indigenous, people of color, low and no income, disabled, foreign-born, and finally, non-English speaking. Some of you may have heard of my personal journey about my story itself and how I came to be at King County Metro. And literally, it's all made possible because of movement provided by public transit. For me, growing up without a car in my household, my earliest memories are of riding the bus everywhere, including zoos, fairs, the church, school work, events, and everything in between. The priority population that I came from starts with my single African-American mother who was physically disabled from contracting polio at the age of 2 and growing up in a public housing project. So if you're keeping track of that, you know that I fit into 3 of the 5 priority population definitions, or used to, because transit does change lives. And now we are here to become even more intentional in our work. For Metro, this opportunity starts with our declaration that mobility has to be a human right. Everyone truly has to deserve the opportunity to move from a place to a place. And place is not just physical in the form of a street address. Place is also socioeconomic. I'm a lifetime resident of King County. I'm proud of the work that government is doing with the idea that we are working together to ensure that all people within our region are provided with an opportunity to thrive. Movement provides access to better employment, better income, better education, better. Our work engagement has led us to being recognized just a couple of years ago as the nation's top transit agency. And still, we continue to see reports that tell us race and place continue to negatively impact one's ability to thrive. So much so that, like many agencies and businesses across the country, we are recognizing that we are not doing enough. Right now, the silent and marginalized are speaking with their presence in our system. A system that does not recognize those in greater need is a flawed system. Next slide. Today, you will hear from my team as we speak to a view of mobility being more than a service. We know improving mobility helps Metro do its part to contribute to healthy communities, thriving economies, and sustainable environments. In order to do that, we believe we must intentionally center our values, including advancing equity, addressing climate change, while also ensuring safety. This approach is consistent with the recommendations the Regional Transit Committee, of which Councilmember Robertson is a member, and the King County Council adopted through the summary of the mobility framework. And the idea of leading with race and focusing on equity aligns with King County's broader equity and social justice approach, ordinances, and strategic plan. And as we talk about leading with race and advancing equity, I want to reiterate that at Metro, we believe a focus on equity is a good for everyone approach, not just what we call priority populations. People need to move across King County, and that need for regional mobility means we'll be bringing people to your areas, even if your specific district area doesn't show up as a top priority on an equity first map. Next slide. Just a quick overview about budget impacts. The county executive transmitted Metro's proposed 2-year budget to King County Council on September 22nd, starting the formal process for funding the operations of the region's largest public transportation network. The council adopted the 2021-2022 budget outlines and our ongoing commitment to providing reliable bus, water taxi, access, paratransit, and van pool services. especially to serve riders where needs are greatest. It shows how Metro plans to continue to respond and adapt to the continued challenges of reduced revenues, reduced projections, and lower ridership as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The budget also helps Metro to prepare for when ridership and revenues recover to allow for the continued growth of a robust mobility network. Now, this budget moves us in the Metro Connect's direction. However, long-term, we will still require a stable, regionally funded package that continues our journey towards a system that provides a clean energy fleet that is also regional, fast, frequent, reliable, and all day. I'm going to turn our presentation now over to my teammate Tessa, my colleague, if you will, and she is going to take you down the path with some more information. Unfortunately, as mentioned, I am going to have to drop off the call due to a previous engagement, but I am looking forward to coming back and hearing from you all on how together we can collectively move, pun intended, move the communities towards their opportunities to thrive. Thank you. And Tessa, I'm passing it over to you.
Great, thanks, Terry. Next slide, please. So it's hard to follow Terry, but I'm Tessa McClellan. I'm leading some of our policy work and wanted to just give you a sense of the work we're doing with the Regional Transit Committee and our council this year to update our adopted policies. So just as some background, we do have we have many documents, three main ones, our strategic plan, our service guidelines, and Metro Connects, which is our long range plan. And all of these policies really help us carry out both our day-to-day work and work towards that long-term mission that Terry talked about in terms of delivering on these bigger picture outcomes like healthy communities and a thriving economy. And as I said, they are something that we do not in a vacuum. We develop them in partnership with the community, with jurisdictional representatives like you all and your staff. And then ultimately they are reviewed, revised, and adopted by both the Regional Transit Committee and the King County Council. Next slide, please. We are updating the policies this year. We have been over the last year and are continuing this year really for a couple key reasons, but one of which is the mobility framework, which Terry mentioned in his comments. So in 2018, the King County Council directed us to think about the future of mobility, especially given regional challenges like growing population, a diversifying population, recognizing that innovations are coming online and changing the transportation demands and interests. And so they really told us to go work with community and figure out some guidance for how we could adapt to all of these changes in a way that is equitable and sustainable. And in doing that, again, really wanting to center our approach to advancing equity and specifically leading with racial justice, because as Terry said, we know that these inequities affect all of us and that our best theory of change for benefiting the region is really to go where needs are greatest first. So this is one of the main driving factors in updating our policies. Next slide, please. We've also really been trying to do our engagement a little differently throughout this process and center community voices. And I apologize if you can hear my barking COVID puppy in the background. He's a little needy. But so we've been working with a mobility equity cabinet for really the last year and a half now or so. And this is a group of 23 community leaders representing those priority populations that Terry mentioned. And we really tried to co-create our mobility framework and the recommendations in it with them around how we can strive to a better, more equitable, more sustainable future, recognizing that there's nobody who better knows than those with lived experience. So they identified some of the challenges you see on this slide, and then also really helped drive the development of the recommendations in our mobility framework, which are now influencing our policy updates. Next slide, please. So again, you can see the three policies we're working to update. Our strategic plan is really that big picture vision, goals and strategies and objectives. It's also where the performance measurement piece of our policy system lies. And so right now we report on our performance measurement through a report to our council every 2 years. Metro Connects is our longer range plan that we developed in partnership with cities and communities, and that was adopted in 2017. And that's really, I like to say, it's sort of our first iteration of the strategic plan vision on a map. And so, it does include a vision for more service, 70% more service by 2040. And then our service guidelines is our implementation policy that talks about how we make decisions about investing in service, whether we're in, the situation we always hope to be in, where we're adding service, or if we're, having to think about cutting back or making changes and restructures. So that's how they all line up. Is one is really kind of big picture, one is that long-term plan, and then one is around implementation. Next slide. And then this just summarizes some of the key ways we're updating the policies this year. So as I mentioned, the mobility framework is really driving these updates in a big way. So in our strategic plan right now, it has 8 goals, and we are moving those goals to be the 10 that are the guiding principles in the mobility framework. And there's a lot of alignment around that. Things like safety came through really clearly. Human potential, or the equity idea, also came through clearly. Same with climate, but there are a couple new concepts really around innovation as one example that we wanted to make sure weren't lost from the mobility framework. And then we are also trying to really streamline and improve our performance measurement system to make sure that it's easier for stakeholders and people like you to go and see it. So it'll be fewer measures, and instead of a report to council, open to the public. For Metro Connects, we're doing some kind of technical updates around both the map, as you can see on this slide, and also making sure the costs are updated since it's been a couple years, and then making sure we incorporate those mobility framework guidance as necessary. And then the service guidelines is about thinking around how we can center our values more in terms of implementation. So, for example, what do we need to center equity higher when we think about growing our system, and how can we better engage with communities, those kinds of things. Next slide, please. And with that, I think I'm turning it over to Brian, but if there are any questions on policy, I'm happy to answer them now or later, whatever is best for you, the council.
I think we'll take questions at the end, Tessa.
Okay,
thank
great.
you.
Thanks.
All right, great. Thanks, Terry. Thanks, Tessa. So my name is Brian Henry, and I work in King County Metro's Service Planning Group. I'm the lead planner for the East King County. I'm also the project manager for our Eastlink Connections project to restructure bus service around the new Eastlink. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's happening right now with recovery and service changes, and then touch on the Eastlink Connections projects, which we're really kicking off this month and next month. So you can learn a little bit more about that. Next slide, please. So first I want to focus on what's happening pretty soon in March 21. So back when COVID hit, in March 2020, we suspended a lot of service. And I'm really happy today to be talking about the fact that we are going to start restoring that service. In fact, over the summer and the fall, we started doing that. And our March 21 service change continues to tweak that. And our big focus is on crowding. Because of COVID, we really have a top priority around health and safety of the customers using our buses. So we need to make sure that there's distance on those buses, so we have limited capacity. And on the routes that have a lot more ridership, we need to make sure that we're addressing crowding so it's safe for our customers out there. So that's a big focus for us in this March service change. In addition, in the fall, we did actually restore some peak commute routes. And unfortunately, we're still seeing very low ridership on some of these routes, 80 to 90% less than they were pre-COVID. And so what we're doing in this service change is tweaking that a little bit to have slightly less frequent buses to really line up with the folks that are wanting to get on there and make sure there's still no crowding, but that we're adjusting our service to align. So that's a little bit about what's happening in March 21. Next slide, please. Cool, thank you. So I want to just touch on some timelines for 3 distinct but closely related projects that are going to be happening. The first in the green and blue is service restoration. And that's kind of what I was talking about with March 21. But in September of 21, we're going to be having a much more significant restoration of service. And so this winter, we're going to be out talking to the public to find out what their needs are as we make decisions about that restoration, and then continuing that process as we continue restorations in March of 2022. So that's the first effort to be restoring our service. The second effort is Eastlink Connections, which I'll talk about in a minute, but is really focused on the 12 new light rail stations that are going to be coming online and aligning our bus service with that. And finally, we have a project for looking at the post-COVID service network. So that's really looking at, what is final recovery look like when we get there, when we've brought back our service. And so that's something that's also going to be happening during this time period. Both Eastlink Connections and the post-COVID service network are going to have traditional equitable engagement processes and also have action by the King County Council. And so, that'll be part of our process overall. Next slide, please. So this is just a little bit of detail. I won't dwell on this slide too much, but it's a little bit more about kind of this equity and engagement approaches that we'll be using. We'll be engaging mobility boards to get transit riders and other residents' viewpoints on what we should be doing. We'll be pulling together partner review boards with representatives from the cities, but also employers, big institutions, community groups. But we'll also be having a strong focus on building relationships in the community, working with organizations to make sure that we're reaching voices that may be hard to reach, that we really want to hear out there. We'll also be doing online formats, and hopefully, as the Safe Start plans allow, we'll be able to eventually do in-person engagement as time goes by. So that's overall, we're out there, we're seeking public input as we recover to tell us things that we need to know about what service should look like. And now I just want to switch slides here and focus a little bit more about Eastlink. So this map is really my favorite thing. And I have to say that I am really excited to be here talking about Eastlink Connections. It's going to be an incredible transformation for this region, and just a complete game changer for mobility and how people get around. I'm also really pleased to be co-leading this process of bus restructure with Sound Transit. We work a lot together behind the scenes, but this is a chance for us to be out talking about this bus restructure together. There are a number of ST Express bus routes as well as many Metro bus routes. And so we're going to be doing that together. A lot of our changes, the biggest ones are focusing on making sure we have great connections to the light rail stations, seamless transfers for folks, and also focusing on, as Tessa and Terry talked about, our priority populations and making sure that we're improving mobility for those folks so that we can help people all across this project area. So those are some of our overall goals. We also want to make sure we're really leveraging Link Light Rail. So because it's fast, super reliable, carries a lot of people, we want to avoid duplicating Eastlink. And so we want to focus on getting people to it, giving them a good transportation network that they can count on. So that's kind of an overview of where we're going. This next slide here focuses on kind of our timeline down here on the bottom, and our phases of engagement. So right now in the winter and spring, we're going to be focusing on needs assessment. So figuring out, what do communities need? What are the priorities of our cities? And then in phase 2, we'll be sharing with people suggested changes to our network so we can find out if we're going in the right direction, be able to adjust. And then by about a year from now and into first quarter of 2022, coming up with a final service proposal to let people know how we've adjusted. And all of this is getting ready for bringing action to the Sound Transit Board and King County Council in the summer of 2022. So we can be ready when Link Light Rail opens. So that was really all I wanted to cover today. This next slide just shows my last slides, really some of the questions that we're asking cities and other folks who we're meeting right now during the needs assessment, and kind of gives you a flavor of how we're starting out. But there'll be a lot more work ahead, and I really look forward to working with you all and making transit better on the east side.
Brian, thank you. And Tessa, you too. Is there a way to provide the community with links to answer those questions that you've proposed up there? Because I'm sure a lot of people would like to weigh in on those answers.
Yes, definitely. We're working on getting a website up so people can learn more about the projects and have the opportunity to get in touch with Metro. So I think once we get our website up, we'll create more direct links to hear from people out there, and we can get the word out so people can comment.
Okay, maybe we can get them on our City of Bellevue website when you're ready. Okay, so I'm going to call on people in this order. Councilmember Zahn, followed by Lee, Stokes, Robertson, Barksdale, Deputy Mayor Newhouse, and then myself. So we have Tessa McClellan. Mayor? Oh my God, don't tell me I'm muted.
No, you're not muted, Mayor.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to mention Councilmember Robertson is an elected chair of the caucus and vice chair of the Regional Transit Committee. So perhaps we'd like to make her go first as a suggestion.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I will let Councilmember Robertson go first, followed by Zahn, Lee, Stokes, Barksdale, Newhouse, and me. And we can ask questions of Tessa McClellan and Brian Henry, who are here to answer. So Councilmember Robertson, would you like to start us off?
Certainly. Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Terry, Tessa, and Brian for coming. We did one-on-ones, or Metro did one-on-ones with all of the committee members a couple of months ago. And during that time, I said, would you please come to Bellevue City Council and share all the work that RTC is doing with my colleagues? And they did, and they're here. And so I'm very, very grateful for that and for the good presentation. I wanted to just, the work plan this year, I don't know if they laid it out as specifically, but the work plan this year is being worked out. It's going to be adopted next month, but it's really going to handle addressing those three major policy documents, the service guidelines, the strategic plan, and the Metro Connects, as well as looking at the post-COVID service hours. And that's going to be really important. And, you look at where we were before COVID. We were supposed to do this work last year. And the county was getting ready to put a ballot measure on for summer of 2020 for more funding to really grow the transit program. And then COVID happened and it just threw everything off. And so we've been trying to reorient to that. One of the things that Metro provided to us at our meeting this month was the baseline ridership data for the time period before COVID. And I think that having that information is going to be really important as we look at what to do post-COVID, because while we've had a fall off in ridership with businesses and people that can work from home, those jobs are going to be back. And as we all know, Bellevue's growing by about 30,000 new jobs just for two major employers. So we're going to need to have really, really good transit service. So tonight, I really hope that my colleagues will ask questions and get a good understanding of the policy work that the Regional Transit Committee is going to do this year, because this is going to be some really important work, and we're going to be finishing up, like I said, in the fall. So they're going to deliver the draft plans to us right before the summer recess. So the themes that have been discussed, we've been discussing these policy documents for the last year. The themes that we have discussed and the Bellevue has supported is, of course, equity. That's been a big shift in looking at how we provide service to people. Also looking at route productivity, meaning serving the job centers and serving, job centers and dense areas in the county. And then the other thing we've talked about is the grand bargain that has gone through our region, which is land use and transportation, that the cities that take all the growth, or accepting the growth, accepting the jobs, accepting the new housing, that we need to have the transit service and other infrastructure to serve that growth. And so those have been some of the big themes we've been discussing at RTC. So I just wanted to share that with you and encourage you all to ask questions of Metro staff, give me feedback as time goes on, because we're going to be dealing with this all year. And then to also ask Joyce if we could please have Sound Transit come and talk about the service allocation when Eastlink opens. I think it would also be really helpful to have DOT come, because we're talking about 405 BRT as one of the major projects. And as this goes on, I'd love to have Metro come back in the fall, maybe even with Sound Transit when the policy documents have been delivered to RTC. And we're looking more at the allocation of when Eastlink opens so that we can have a joint presentation. Because I know that every single person on this council cares an awful lot about having really good transit service, but so does our community. And this is one way for them to really understand what's happening, the work that we're doing, and how important we find this topic to be. So thanks so much.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Robertson. Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. You know, I agree with Councilmember Robertson's comments and you know, being a part of the 405-167 committee, I really echo the piece around the BRT because we know that we don't have the ability right now to bond against that toll revenue right now, which means that, as I understand it, the south end of the BRT is still budgeted, but the north end is in jeopardy. And so to the degree that when we talk about seamless transfer, the BRT transfer point is right at our downtown transit center. And the way that seamless between King County Metro and Sound Transit is going to be so key to make sure that things work. Because if they don't, we're going to get all gummed up right next to City Hall at the transit center, which I would say that no one wants that. So that's definitely one of the concerns. And I'm also thinking about the fact that when we talk about frequent, reliable, and all day, that for some of the people that use transit, just daytime is not really sufficient. So to the degree that we look at more broadly at service requirements and hours, I think will be important because we do have needs beyond just the daytime service. So I guess to echo the doing that broad outreach and survey so that we can really get a good understanding of that. And then lastly, as I think about at the federal level, we will want to understand what kind of funding may be coming from the federal level to support transit, how we might be able to regionally partner to do some advocacy at the national level for better transit funding, and not just our regular transit, but also micro transit, because that first and last mile will be really important for a lot of our communities that are not on the frequent transit network. So to the degree that we can leverage support and funding for micro transit, it will be a key to our full mobility in Bellevue. Thank you.
Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a very important topic for all of us. Transportation, you know, that's the basis for quality of life, for business, economic development. And, you know, so it's very, very important. So we are very interested in talking and discussing and coming up with ideas to make it work better. And as we know, the region has been doing a lot of work in doing that. And there are many agencies that are doing whatever they can. And now, of course, we're only going to be speaking on Metro. Metro, as we have seen, it's proven to be very, very well run, you know, I mean, one of the best in the country. And as we can also see, the ridership, everything has been increasing. And so I think it has its place. It's important. We need to, especially, you know, listening to Mr. White, you know, his very eloquent speech about the importance of Metro. It's very important that it has a place, and we want to make sure it's you know, works well. And so I agree with this point that we need to look at this all. We need to talk to Sound Transit. We all need to be coordinated. We need to look at this, Washington State DOT, because they're all connected. And we need to, especially in a sense, you know, we haven't talked about that. That's why I want to just add that. It's the last mile. I think Councilman Robertson mentioned that, or Councilman Zahn, whoever it is. It's the last mile. We know Sound Transit is coming, and they're going to let us, you know, let people come in. And I think Metro, somebody mentioned too, whether it's Tesla or somebody, you know, but you don't want to compete with Sun Transit, right? You want to go from where Sun Transit let people off and go to where the destinations are. So it's important. We have a big downtown that we're, 2, 3 stations that's going to drop people off, and they got to be able to get there and then get into the neighborhood, because our neighborhood is very important. That's part of what I was talking about, the importance of transportation. So all these people need to be at the table. And of course, we and our employers got to be at the table. And people who work in the city needs to be at the table. And I think that's very important. And I'm glad to see your documents laid out well. And of course, we don't get into detail, and we, rely on our representative, Councilmember Robertson, to, do the hard work. And we want to continue this. And I appreciate you coming in. And I think we're on the right track. The challenges out there, obviously, with COVID-19. Everything comes down to money. How do we do that? And how do we do it with also many partnerships involved? How do we do collaboratively and without competing with each other, running over each other, and competing for the same pot of money? So it's important. And so I appreciate you coming, talking to us, and it's well done. We appreciate getting to know you more and hear what you have to say. So we all have to work hard. One last thing I want to mention. We didn't mention is we have new technology now we have to look at. We have to do things more efficiently. We have to do things more cost effectively. We have to do this for the new generation, right? How people work, how people live, and how people go to school, how do people do whatever. So I think technology is one factor. And I think the city has been working on some technology solutions. So I would love to work with Metro and with other, partners to see how we can, use those to improve efficiency. So we can do more with less. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, thank you very much for the overall presentation on all these factors. I want to say that, we talk a lot and theorize a lot and talk about what we should do, shouldn't do, and all that. What I'm impressed with is actually you're doing it and moving things forward, and that's what we need. I really appreciate Councilmember Robertson's report, and would like to suggest that actually, she kind of hinted at this, I'd like to have a report and talk about the Regional Transportation Committee's work plan, and we could also have, I could present the Regional Policy Committee's work plan and talk about that, because it helps inform everybody where we're going, and I think it's good to understand the work that is being done. Again, we talk theoretically about we should do this or that, but we're doing a lot of that. So it's very great to have you come and tell us about what you're doing. And I think the important thing is really, and I think we've been doing this for some time now, as opposed to in the past when it was different, but even more so now, is the different transit organizations working together. And it's got to be a seamless system, all the way from, getting from your front door to the transit, to getting downtown and other places. I do want to emphasize that the BRT is very, very vital to the region's mobility, and particularly Bellevue. We're right in the middle, and we want real BRT. We know it's the financing challenges are just humongous, but I just want to encourage us not to ever lose sight of the necessity for that. And I know you're working on that, all of you. I think, there are a lot of ways we talked about some of these things that have been mentioned already, or things we've been talking about for years. Again, it's a question of not talking about what we could be doing, but what are we doing? And, having a better transit system so people can get around where they need to go is very important, and getting information out about that. The other thing that's important, I think, is really working with the public to understand and to appreciate and know about transit. I think part of the problem is sometimes the attitudes based on past situations and all is negative towards transit. And what I hear you're saying, all of you saying, is that we're working together and working on building a system that is attractive and that actually gets people using transit. We have a lot of transit. You see buses coming around places in Bellevue and all, and just a few people traveling on them. And they're going to places that are necessary, I think. So again, I appreciate, I think, a lot more forthrightness and a lot more public relationships and work like that, and working with the Regional Transportation Committee and others and the cities is going to be a big step, because in the cities of the future are going to be different from what we're experiencing today and in the past. And transit is going to be a huge part of that. And we're so excited to have Sound Transit. Looks like it's really on track and on time, and even opening up the parking garage early, as we had, really hoped that happened, is great. So I just want to say, we could ask all kinds of questions and go back over and repeat stuff we said, but I really want to applaud the collaborative work that the regional transportation organizations are doing, because that's what it's going to take to make it successful. It's not a competition, it's a collaborative, collective impact. So appreciate it very much, and come back and talk to us again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Stokes. Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you, Mayor, and thank you to Tessa, Terry, and Brian for being here and reporting on the current situation with King County Metro. I agree with what my colleagues have already said. I guess I just had one question. As we talk about priority populations, and one of the obvious benefits of transit is access, not just in the nearby area, but across the region. How do you balance targeting service for an unmet area, but at the same time make sure that that infrastructure, that backbone is there across the region to make sure that that those priority populations are able to have access to those job opportunities across the region?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, honestly, it's one we're having discussions with our policymakers and others right now about how we want to do that in the future. We do have Metro Connects, our long range plan, is now what we're using to set our target service levels for all of the network across the county. So that's region wide. And that calls for significantly more service throughout the region. So, we definitely see a need for more service everywhere, not just where there are priority populations, but I do think we have a commitment and need to think about how we can better focus our investments first, and especially when there's limited resources, how do you grow first in the places that have more priority populations and maybe haven't received as much investment in the past. And so I think it's not about not having a full system. We recognize that we need to have a full system, but how can we get there first? And then also how can we work with regional leaders to get more funding to grow so we can grow more in the long run, which we all want to do.
Awesome, thank you. And as I guess the report comes back, be interested I completely agree with making sure there's access for priority populations. Just want to make sure that they have access, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's one thing Terry talks about a lot is it's not like people, including priority populations, need to move throughout the whole county. Like one example he uses is he, lived in the South but worked in the North. And so we definitely recognize that as well. And the service guidelines are complicated and look at a couple of different factors in terms of how we balance and prioritize. So there are multiple things that go into that.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Barksdale. Deputy Mayor Newhouse.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation, Terry, Brian, and Tessa, and for being here tonight. Really appreciate it. 3 quick questions that I'll get to right away so I don't go over my allotted time, but in rapid fashion, those 3 questions are, first and foremost, what services is Metro planning or hoping to offer that might take advantage of smart technology in terms of mobility options? That's question number 1. Number 2, when does Metro plan to restart the planning for the K-line? As you know, this is something that's very important to the city of Bellevue, to this council, and as well as large employers like Amazon. So certainly that is a priority for us. And then lastly, my 3rd question is, does Metro know when it's likely to receive any federal funding as part of the package. And I wrote it down here to make sure I get it right, but the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, or CRRSSA, as everyone's familiar with that acronym, I'm sure. Will you be receiving that funding? Do you know if you'll be receiving any funding and how you might implement that funding? Thank you.
Yes. So maybe I'll take a stab at the ones that I can answer, and Brian can follow. And if we may need to get back to you on a few of those things. So I'm going to remember them in reverse order. So the funding, I do think we expect to get some funding. The amount yet is not for sure. And Terry did give an update to the Regional Transit Committee last week, and we can give you more specifics. I think there's a staff conversation happening this week, or like some of the things are happening soon. But if the allocation was done in a similar way to last time, we would get about the same amount of money as we did last time, which I think was in the realm of around $258 million. But we're also hearing that there may be some interest in doing an allocation differently. So all that to say, unless things have changed since I had last heard Terry's report, I don't know that there's been a decision yet, but we do expect to get more funding, and can certainly get you an update once we have that answer done. And then innovative services, Brian may know more. Well, we do offer, that's one of the things we are really excited about at Metro, is our wanting to test new technologies to meet that first to last mile problem that a lot of people mentioned. And so, things like VR, other on-demand services that we've been trying out. But I'm not a service planner or in that program, so Brian may be able to talk more about specifics. And I would also defer to Brian on the K-line question, or we can get back to you on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I can address the sort of innovation piece a little bit. I think that right now we actually have a partnership with the city of Bellevue where we're testing technology in the Crossroads neighborhood, where people have an app that they can use to flexibly on-demand schedule trips, and that will allow them to connect to frequent transit hubs. So I think that's been fabulous that we've been able to work with Bellevue to make that a reality. And so it's an example of how we can work with our city partners to innovate and learn. And as we learn from these platforms, we can apply them, to new areas and build on the lessons that we've learned. And so, for instance, one thing with this current pilot is not only is it like on demand, but we're looking at the option of being able to possibly, if demand is high enough, to be able to have the option of even taxi cabs potentially supporting additional trips beyond the service level that we have as our baseline. So we're really looking at integrating all the possible types of mobility through technology. So we're always looking for opportunities to do that. And I think it would be best to kind of follow up on K-line planning. I don't have a firm answer right now, so we can definitely get back to you about that.
Okay, great. I look forward to it. Thank you.
Well, I just feel so lucky to have you here tonight and to have such strong transportation support on our council. We have Councilmember Robertson and Zahn both working very hard representing the city of Bellevue, and then our tremendous staff. So I feel like we're in good hands here. Terry White said that transit changes lives, and that's so true. But when you live far away from where you work, and if it's a long drive, it's an even longer transit ride. And I just think it's so important that we have the affordable housing and the transit in the same place, so people can be closer to where they work. And as we work to put affordable housing in our city, I hope that you will partner with us and make sure that we get the transit mobility that we need to connect these people to their jobs.
We definitely agree on the importance of kind of connecting housing and transit service. And so, yeah, we look forward to, we share that commitment, and I'm certain we'd be open to partnering as we can as well. So
good. And I'm looking forward to seeing the service recovery happen and the engagement with that. So looking forward to long conversations with you in the future, and thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Miyake, what's next?
Okay, Mayor and Council Member, The next item is the development agreement to enable a mixed-use multifamily development in the Crossroads sub-area. Tonight, staff will present a draft development agreement for the Crossroads multifamily project. And just by way of background, this development agreement is required by the Land Use Code to allow multifamily development in Planning District E in the Crossroads sub-area and provides for public benefits pursuant to the comprehensive plan. This evening, staff seeks council directions on preparation of the development agreement for purposes of a public hearing and final approval as early as March. So joining us this evening is a number of staff. I'm just turning it over to Trisna Tanis, the consulting attorney, to kick the presentation off. Trisna?
Thank you, City Manager Miyake. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members, and those attending tonight. I am going to share my screen here so we can run through our presentation with you. With me tonight are Sally Nichols, Urban Design Manager, as well as Peter Rosen, Senior Planner, both from Development Services Department. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Great, thank you. If I can. There we go. Okay. So we will be presenting a staff report on the Crossroads Multifamily Development Agreement. After staff's presentation and council discussion, staff would like direction from council to prepare the development agreement for public hearing and final approval in March. So for our agenda tonight, we'll begin by explaining what a development agreement is and go through the requirements in the land use code and the comprehensive plan policies that give rise to this particular development agreement. We will give a brief background on the applicable legislation, history, and intent of that legislation, then describe the project being proposed by Terranomics Crossroads, who you heard from earlier this evening, and explain the public benefits that are being provided in the development agreement. We will then describe the public process for this project and our anticipated next steps. And we will close by recalling the direction we are seeking from council. So to begin, we wanted to orient you to what a development agreement is, or a DA. A DA is a contract between the city and the property owner. It provides for standards and conditions for the development of the property. The DA assures the property owner that the development regulations applicable to the project will not change during the terms of the agreement. In this instance, the DA includes a number of public benefits based on applicable comprehensive plan policies that we will go through in more detail shortly to enable this multifamily development. Development agreements are authorized by the Local Project Review Act, or Chapter 3670B of the RCW. And per the RCW, in order to approve a DA, the city is required to hold a public hearing prior to approval. So in Bellevue, we look to our land use code and comprehensive plan for those instances when a DA is appropriate and required to accomplish certain policy objectives. In this case, Land Use Code Section 2010-440, which contains the residential land use chart, provides for Note 6, which prohibits multifamily development at the subject location or Crossroads Planning District E, unless there is a council-approved development agreement. Therefore, this DA is being advanced and is required prior to approval of design review for this project. I'm going to now turn over the presentation over to Ms. Nichols to go through the legislative intent of this DA requirement and the applicable comprehensive plan policies. Sally?
Great, thank you, Trisna. Again, I'm Sally Nichols. I'm the Urban Design Planning Manager in the Land Use Division and Development Services. And I'll give you a little background on this particular Crossroads DA process. The city adopted the DA requirement in the Land Use Code in Ordinance 6229 in June 2015, and it had an associated Land Use Code amendment that put in the footnote in the land use charts that Trisna just referenced. The first project to take advantage of this allowance for multifamily residential housing was the Crossroads Village project, which is just north of the Crossroads Shopping Center. It's now called the Upton. It was where the Hagen grocery store was. And that project, through the DA process, had to provide public benefits to the city. So the reason that this adopted ordinance came to be was kind of three-pronged. One of it was an update to the historical prohibition of multifamily development in the Crossroads Planning District E. And Planning District E takes in most of the large chunk of Planning District E is the Crossroads Mall or Crossroads Shopping Center. And things have been changing, as everybody knows. Things are changing fast in Crossroads. And so there was a change in interest to have more mixed-use multifamily development. And there also was a change in demand. And you can certainly see that with the development that's happening in this area. The ordinance required public benefits with this mixed-use multifamily development. And a lot of the public benefits have to do with connectivity. So including robust pedestrian connections with the Crossroads Park, which is directly adjacent to the east where that is appropriate. And also the provision of public open space. And lastly, the ordinance helps us track the housing developments that are being proposed and also track them for consistency with the overall vision for the whole Crossroads sub-area. Next. And they're basically within the comprehensive plan and within the Crossroads sub-area plan, there are effectively two policies and one diagram that really direct what we are hoping to see within any development agreement. So policy SCR 79 requires that this mixed-use multifamily developments have high quality, that they avoid conflicts with commercial uses, that they're complementary to residential and commercial uses. So there always is this acknowledgement that in this area, there's going to be this hopefully robust and interesting mix of multifamily residential and commercial. And lastly, that the developments are consistent with this diagram. And then policy CR 81 takes us a little bit further and really delineates the kind of connectivity, pedestrian connectivity, open space, and pedestrian activity areas that we would like to see as public benefit. So in this figure SCR2, and in this case, north is up and at the bottom is Northeast 8th to orient you. I'm sure everybody's probably very familiar with Crossroads Shopping Center, but just to get you located, the red box is effectively where this proposal is taking place, which is just north of Michael's, the existing Michael's building. And as you can see on this figure, one of the things it does is it lays out where this connectivity should be, the pedestrian connectivity in the dashed lines. It addresses park streets and enhancement of streets. And that is on, you can see on 160th Avenue Northeast, there's a double row of dots. That's basically an enhanced streetscape. And also it shows this large gray area, gray arrow in the middle is an open space and a really important connectivity opportunity between Crossroads Park and the shopping center. So between the two policies and the diagram, it really directs what we are looking for as far as public benefit within the development agreement. Next slide, please. And this is just an aerial photograph to further kind of locate where the project is located. It's a lot of gray out there, a lot of rooftop and a lot of surface parking, which is changing dramatically within the Crossroads area as shopping centers are taking a fresh look at what they may evolve into. So this proposal is where the blue is, and that's where the building is located. The open space opportunity area, which is where that gray area arrow was on the diagram, is the green rectangle, and that's that strong connection between the park to the right and to the shopping center. And the dotted arrows just are showing all the opportunities for pedestrian connectivity. There are bus routes on Northeast 8th and on 156th Avenue Northeast. So there are a lot of opportunities for pedestrian connections to be enhanced and to be improved. And then also, if you look between the proposed building and the shopping center, there is a street, and that street continues all the way up to Northeast 15th Street. And that goes through that Crossroads Village, the first multifamily development that happened with a DA. And so this is just another segment creating this very robust retail pedestrian street. And Peter Rosen will talk a little bit more about the specifics of this project and what's in the DA.
I'm not hearing Peter.
I apologize. I'm sorry. My name is Peter Rosen. I'm a senior planner with Development Services. And the project proposal is for a 6-story multi-use building. There'll be 5 stories of residential above the ground level of retail and parking, a total of 224 residential units and 14,500 square feet of retail at the ground level. The retail will be oriented inward toward Crossroads Mall to activate the street level. And a parking garage will have 253 parking stalls. There'll be 102 on the ground level, level 1, and then 151 stalls below, below the ground level. This project proposal will require design review, permit approval, and that would occur after the development agreement. The development agreement is required to allow for the multifamily use. And so the project proposal will go through a design review after the development agreement. Next slide, please. So this shows, kind of summarizes all of the public benefits that are included in the proposal. Just want to note that in the comprehensive plan policies that they are not prescriptive in terms of the public benefits. They're just described as providing public open space to include activity gathering areas, the park connections to Crossroads Park, and then pedestrian improvements. So this slide and the next slides will provide a little more detail of each of the public benefit areas, but this shows basically all of the public benefits. You have the open space opportunity area, which would be between the residential building and Stone Gardens. And then there's the park interface area, which is an area that's needed to be improved. And there's a grade change between the current site and Crossroads Park. So the interface area will be improved to make the open space and pedestrian connection more at grade and seamless. And there's also a mid-block connector between existing Michaels and the proposed residential building. And then there are pedestrian improvements along 160th Avenue Northeast. I just want to note that these slides, the orientation of it, that north is toward the left of the page. And so I just wanted to, it's a little bit different orientation here. Next slide, please. So this provides a little more of a detail of the open space opportunity area. It's approximately 36,820 square feet. And again, it would be between the Stone Gardens expansion and the Crossroads multifamily building. And this is a key piece of the public benefits in that it's really intended to provide this connection to Crossroads Park and the community center, and to meld some of the open space between the Crossroads Mall and into the park and create more of a seamless open space between the two. It includes a 12-foot wide urban trail for pedestrians and bicycles. It also includes informal gathering areas, seating, hardscape, and a lot of landscaping. Next slide, please. This is more of a detail of the park interface area. It's approximately 1,250 square feet. As I mentioned, there'll be work that will be required because of the existing grade change. And so some of that work needs to get onto Parks property to make that transition. And the Parks Department has been involved in reviewing some of the concepts, and they will also be reviewing all of the specific details for the improvements that would occur on the Parks property. You can see the urban trail that would be going between that open space opportunity area and Crossroads Park and Community Center. Next slide, please. In terms of mid-block connections and urban trails, just mentioned the urban trail that's through the open space area. And there's also a mid-block connection that would be between Michaels and the Crossroads building. And the intent of that is to connect to 160th and with Crossroads Place inside the mall. And so it runs east-west and would provide a pedestrian connection. It's approximately a 10-foot wide pedestrian bicycle access that would be provided at mid-block there. Next slide, please. And then the other pedestrian improvement that's proposed is along 160th Avenue Northeast. So this would be on the west side of 160th Avenue Northeast. And currently there's a gap in terms of there's not a sidewalk improved down to Northeast 8th Street. So what's being proposed here is not only frontage improvements along the in front of the building, but it would be extended off site so that there will be a connection down to Northeast 8th Street where there's a bus stop. And so what's proposed is a new sidewalk and landscape strip that will match what's further north currently, and will provide that connection along the west side of 160th Avenue. I think it goes back to Trisna.
Thanks, Peter. So the applicant has contemplated, as you heard earlier, development on the site for a few years. But this particular proposal was formally noticed in January 2019. Around that same time, the applicant conducted a robust community outreach including a community outreach survey and installation of an exhibit at Mini City Hall at Crossroads Mall with display boards and survey response cards. They did receive approximately 498 respondents, both online and offline, who participated in the survey. So a lot of the results of the survey prioritized connections between Crossroads Park and Crossroads Mall, and to provide for community gathering spaces, as well as kind of engagement for all ages and accessibility for everyone. So the project was also renoticed earlier this month on January 7th to include information about this development agreement and the accompanying SEPA, and to solicit further feedback from the public. We have received so far only one inquiry for additional project information as a result of this renoticing, which we provided to the person inquiring. So that concludes our presentation. So at this time, we do want to reiterate our request for council to direct staff to prepare the development agreement for public hearing and final approval in March. And we are here and available for any questions council may have. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that presentation. And I'm going to let everybody have a chance to question or comment in this order. We'll start with Councilmember Barksdale as liaison to the Planning Commission. So he's got deep knowledge of this, and Councilmember Robertson, Stokes, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, Councilmember Zahn, Councilmember Lee, and myself. So starting with Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you, Mayor. I actually like this project. I mean, and the idea here, I mean, given the TOD focus, I mean, with the mixed use, but also access to open space in the parks and such. I know there were a couple of concerns in the comments from in terms of themes in the survey around parking and traffic. I guess it looks like there's been some mitigation around parking by providing a parking garage and traffic. I think of, you know, in terms of living and playing, having access to the shops, but then maybe working in terms of the bus, access to transit. But can you comment a little bit on the thinking around mitigating those concerns?
Sure, thank you, Councilmember Barksdale. I'm going to turn this over to Peter to talk a little bit more about parking and any traffic mitigation that is part of the project review. Peter?
Sure. In terms of the traffic, that will be reviewed with the design review permit. The project will require concurrency. So at this time, they do have a traffic study that's been submitted, but staff hasn't evaluated that in detail. That will be part of the design review permit. But in terms of parking, I mentioned that the parking garage will have a total of 253 stalls for the 224 multifamily units. The project will eliminate 350 surface parking stalls where the building will be constructed. And they are also reconfiguring some of the surface parking. So the project is going to provide 321 parking spaces overall, which is, so there's a net decrease of 29 parking spaces in Crossroads Shopping Center. What I'd like to note is that there's 2,245 parking stalls. So there'll be 29 spaces that would be reduced. They did a very detailed parking study, and they did that during the Christmas holiday, and determined that the reduction in that parking would not have a big effect on the shopping mall.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Robertson.
Thank you. Was that the 2019 Christmas holiday or 2020? when that study was done, Pete?
That was 2019. That was when they did their the large survey at Mini City Hall and Crossroads.
Okay, pre-COVID, so normal patterns. Thanks. So this is a development agreement, and that I'd like to just make it clear to the public, if I could. I don't know if Trisna or Peter's going to answer, but a development agreement is something that we're asked to do that we could get in exchange public benefit. And when council, if we do it, we're sitting as legislators, not quasi-judicial decision makers, which means we can take into account all sorts of policy considerations. That's right. Yes. Trisha. Yeah.
Yes, it is a council action to take and to consider all the public benefits that are part of the agreement.
And there's nothing under the law that says that we are required to grant anyone a development agreement at any time, right?
That is my understanding.
Okay. So I just wanted to make that clear because we don't do these very often. And from my perspective, in 2015, when we adopted the sub-area policy, we put in a couple of things we want. In order to build any density with multifamily at this site, the person needs a development agreement. And the policies we adopted at that time require transit not transit connections, park connections, open space, etc. From my perspective, that's a floor, right? We need to understand that there's good public benefit here. Since 2015, this council has been incredibly focused on affordable housing. We've adopted the MFTE. We've just passed the 1590. We have done land use incentives. We have changed the comp plan we've adopted the affordable housing strategy. And I know I've heard every single one of my colleagues repeat over and over about how the development's happening now. We need affordable housing, particularly transit-oriented development. To me, this is transit-oriented development. It's right on a rapid ride line. It is an employment center. It is a housing center. And I would really like to see affordable housing here. There's nothing that says we have to adopt this development agreement as it's written. We can ask the developer to give us more public benefit, including committing to affordable housing. And they would get the MFTE for that if they did it under our MFTE code. So there's nothing that requires us to do this. So I really would like to see that come forward. And I'd like to have staff reach out to the developer and ask them if they are willing to commit to a certain percentage of affordable housing as part of this project as the public benefit, as additional public benefit to Bellevue. A lot of the improvements that are proposed as public benefit, they're great. They'll make a great project, but a lot of those are really benefits to the people that are going to live there. I don't see a huge broader public benefit that we would have with an affordable housing project. So staff, if I could ask, and I'd like my colleagues to weigh in on this, I would really like to see an additional proposal on this. We need affordable housing. And I personally am not in favor of adding a bunch of super density to places if we're not getting affordable housing. They're getting a huge bonus here. They could not build this project without a development agreement. They can build whatever they want to do under the code. They don't have to give us affordable housing. But if they want to have the super bonus, I would really like to see some affordable housing. So I'd love to have my colleagues weigh in on that and to have council or to have staff take that to the developer and then come back to us in a study session to see if that is something the developer would be amenable to, because I think that would make a better project. So thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, just a couple of question first, and then I'll make a comment. The Crossroads Community Center and the Bellevue Youth Performing Arts Center, they're really close, right? They're pretty close to that in the area, right?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, okay. So there's kind of additional factors there in terms of I think in terms of a positive in terms of the facility. I'm really glad to hear Councilmember Robertson speak about this. I totally agree. I think that we need to, I mean, affordable housing is something we need to look to for everywhere, and particularly with these amenities that are part of this. You know, again, she ticked them off. I don't need to repeat them, but I think that this is a prime development for that. And it is probably the biggest public benefit we can get from this. So I would second Councilmember Robertson's request and like to see that come back and have, you know, proposal to the developer. We need to step up and actually put in place our policies on this. Thank you. And thank you, Tristan and Peter. This is really great work, and really appreciate the effort, and the presentation has been very, very clear and all, and really appreciate that. Just want to, always nice to see that, and looking forward to the interaction and see where we go and the process next time. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Newhouse.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, great presentation. Appreciate that. In general, I like this project. I think it certainly has a lot of benefits to the community, especially in the area that it's in. I would also echo Councilmember Robertson's thoughts on returning or going back to the developer. In fact, Trisna, I'm not sure, did that conversation happen at all, or has that been posed to the developer yet? Perhaps there is no interest there. Can you speak to that at all?
I am not aware of any conversation that we've had suggesting affordable housing. As you know, of course, the proposal does not include any affordable housing units.
Right. Okay, great. Well, again, I would be in favor of going back to the developer. I think, again, as Councilmember Robertson pointed out, I think we're all very dedicated to the affordable housing in Bellevue, and all the building that is happening now. Now is the time to do this, and certainly there's some programs that they can take advantage of as well, like the MFTE. The only other question I had was in regards to, because it seemed to me during the construction phase, the majority of the traffic would be happening on that 160th Street, and I'm not sure this would be included in the DA or not, but I'd be a little bit concerned about some of the retail and the restaurants that are based there, especially some of the retail that are very important to the Russian Armenian community there. I'd hate to see, you know, the impacts that they're already feeling due to the pandemic, you know, for them to be further impacted where customers can't get in to do their grocery shopping or pick up whatever needs that they might have. So can you speak to that at all, Trisna?
Sure, and Peter may be able to help a little bit with answering this a little bit more if I don't cover everything, but typically when we have a project proposal like this where there is going to be some impact to existing development, part of the mitigation, you know, so to speak, would be to look at all of those impacts and to ensure that there is a potentially different access routes or something like that to accommodate and to help with some of the congestion that may occur as part of the construction activities. That is part of what we would look at during project review and would require that as potentially as a condition of approval or something like that. But Peter, if I'm missing something, please add on.
No, I think that's correct, Trisna, is that typically we require maintaining access to existing businesses, though there's some level of disruption with construction, but the access would be maintained.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I 100% support Councilmember Robertson's suggestion about affordable housing. I mean, to me, this is transit-oriented development. We have the B line that goes over to Crossroads now. The K line that we are advocating for is also part of the expansion in that area. So this is the time to make sure that we are getting opportunities for housing, affordable housing, especially since this is a development agreement. And I would say that I also agree that maybe in 2015, when we were thinking about public benefits, we were thinking about the connectivity and the open space, which are really important as well. right? So if I look at the plans, it looks beautiful. The community gathering places, having parking that's both below ground and so that we can leverage the footprint that's there. And yet those public benefits are not going to get us to the affordable housing that we absolutely need to have. And so I absolutely support going back and talking to the developer about that and making sure that we are also talking about affordable units that are not just studios, but are different sizes of units as well. And then the other one is glad to see that they did a traffic study during the busiest time over the Christmas holiday in 2019. And yet there's a part of me that worries about doing the concurrency as part of design review after they've already provided the design and the layout and the number of stalls and the traffic pattern. So I would like to better understand where we think the traffic analysis is likely to end up, so we don't have the developer move forward and then we find that from a concurrency standpoint that we have some issues. So wondered if you could comment on that.
Sure, council members if I understand correctly, your question, you're trying to find out the sequencing of when concurrency is being reviewed, and so that we're not at a place where that concurrency isn't accurate.
Yeah, and to look at that proactively so that we're not, the developer and the city are not reacting to what we ultimately find in the traffic analysis and concurrency.
Of course. Maybe I can have Sally respond to this one as in terms of process. Sally, you're on mute. Sorry.
Sorry, so I'm thinking. No, generally we do look at it at the design review level just because we have a lot more information about exactly what's happening with the project. So I think that we'll have to, although we've gotten a lot of information from the applicant already, I think we'll have to sort of step back and see what we can actually get and talk to our transportation reviewers also and include them in the conversation, because a lot of that is where we have a development team and the transportation is a huge part of the development team. So I think it's a good question and a good thing to address at this point so that there aren't any surprises.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I like the project, especially if we can substantiate the public benefits that, the staff has mentioned. So I got a couple of questions first. It sounded to me generally, yes, there's a public benefit. It meets all those things that were talked about, like park connections and open space and so on. So I'm just curious about the residential building. It occupies a big piece of it, east and west. So even though it provides a lot of the connection, however, I don't know whether the building itself would actually cut off the circulation, which exists today. That's one question. And how do we look at it, as a trade-off, I guess, for public benefit. That's one question. Second question regarding parking. You mentioned you were losing 27 stalls. Yeah, that's not significant. But the question is, there's how many, 300 some spaces surface. Are those parking all available to the public? That's first question. It is now, it's available, it's free, everything's there. And then the garage, parking garage underground, are they provided just for the people who live in the apartments, or are they also available for the public? Sounded like it doesn't. Sounded like it's not. Okay, so that's just a question. If it is, that's additional benefit, I guess. So the we need to also look at what other public benefits are maybe. So it was mentioned the Crossroads Community Center is close by. Bellevue Utilities is close by, and and also east of which is a lot of nonprofit organizations close by, and they've got international pockets there. So I'm not sure what kind of additional connection this might provide as benefit, but it sounded like potentially it's possible, or maybe not. I'm just trying to raise the question to the staff when you are looking at public benefit. Finally, I think Councilmember Robinson's suggestion of affordable housing, I think that's a great one, because as she mentioned, there's a lot of interest of the city council. The only thing I just want to add is, I think we want to encourage affordable housing, period. And I'm not sure, what can we I do not like to prescribe to a project that is already providing public benefit. And, if they are truly public benefit, we don't know what the next project would be like, or if there's no project at all, which is not good, So I like not to discourage people from providing what we need. We need is more housing, absolutely. Yes, more housing. And sure, absolutely, affordable housing is important. But even within affordable housing, we're talking about 0 to 30%, 30%, 50%, 50%, 70%, 80%. So what is affordable? And we've heard people talking about, so it's all important. It's all degrees of benefit to the city. So I would like to pose all these as questions, before we really determine what, we are looking for at this development, and we are looking at it as a project that will provide us public benefit. And let's get as much as we can out of it, okay? But not just say, I don't know whether it's, the net is bad or good or neutral, okay? Let's see what we can do with it, because I think we do need housing. And one question that was also raised is outreach. You have a few hundred people responded. And so I don't know what responses have you gotten? And when they respond, when you present to them, all the discussion we're doing tonight proposes a lot of questions and benefits, or not so much benefits, I think the public would need to respond to. So I'm not quite sure. And I know we're going to have a public hearing, yeah, but that's, toward the end of everything. So if we have the opportunity, I would really like to see what this project is going to be, and what benefits are we going to get. And then, we probably, do some public outreach to say, hey, this is a really good project, and that would really be good, and we want to seize on the opportunity. I don't want to just arbitrarily say, well, no, you guys, just because you didn't meet one thing, and it's not going to work, and then we lose the opportunity to have more housing. I think we need more housing, because all the benefit you pointed out, it's close to transit, close to TUD, close to, all that, B-line, and I think that's, and ultimately we need more housing. And, if Ron Scher, that's still there with Terranomics, I'm not sure if he is or not. I'm sure he's very sympathetic to affordable housing, and he will be very serious to look at it. So it's not a bad thing to pose the question to the developers. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Lee. So I do concur with my fellow council members that, it's just essential that we get affordable housing in every TOD development that we have. And unfortunately, we don't mandate it. We don't have mandatory inclusionary housing in all our TOD, so it's optional. for our developers. And this developer has every right not to put that in, but I really question why they chose not to and why they're not taking advantage of the MFTE that we put into Crossroads. And I'd love to see if they would work with us on this and put some affordable housing in, because it's in the school area. You know, it's walking distance to Interlake High School. It's near the Crossroads Community Center. It's by YES, Youth Eastside Services. It's by the park. It's just an amazing location. And of course, all the amenities that go with it. And with all those walking areas and connections, it's going to be a very desirable place to be, and then right on a bus line. So I would love to see if we can affordable housing in that site. And if we can't get it, then we need to rethink our affordable housing incentives and how we get that to happen. Because I feel like we only have 3 more years of TOD development going on before light rail's in. So we need to really take advantage of these opportunities. So I wonder if staff could come back with some answers to our questions on what is possible here in terms of all those things that we've talked about at the next meeting.
Yes, absolutely. So if council is interested in exploring adding affordable housing as part of the development agreement, staff will want to analyze this a little bit further, certainly for consistency with the comprehensive plan, but also with the land use code and other applicable regulations, as well as per, I think, one of council member suggestions to speak with the applicant about this and get back to council with this information.
That would be great. Is there anything that Trishna has not covered that any of you may have mentioned tonight? Okay, that sounds good. Thank you very much. We look forward to the next phase of discussion on this.
Thank you.
Okay. And Mr. Miyake, what's next?
The next topic on your study session, Mayor and Council Member, is the Independent Force Investigation Team. It's also known as the King County IFIT Interlocal Cooperative Agreement. And just by way of background, State Initiative 940 mandates that all deadly force incidents by police officers be investigated by a team of investigators that are independent of the involved agency. The proposed interlocal agreement up for discussion and in front of you this evening allows Bellevue to join with other King County agencies to form an independent force investigation team, also known as IFIT, that will investigate those deadly force incidences in North King County. This evening, staff does seek council direction to prepare a resolution for a future meeting, which authorizes execution of an interlocal agreement, which is in front of you this evening. Joining us this evening is Chief Milet and some of his staff. With that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Chief.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, Mayor, Council, Deputy Mayor, Mr. Miyake. I apologize in advance because I'm having some connectivity problems. So if I freeze up, my colleagues will jump in and bring it home. So tonight, staff is presenting an interlocal cooperative agreement for council consideration, an agreement that has been proposed between North King County Eastside agencies. The agreement will create an independent force investigation team, herein referred to as IFIT-KC. The purpose of the team will to investigate all use of force incidents that result in death or substantial or great bodily harm and which occur in a member's jurisdiction. I believe staff has provided council with a copy of this proposed interlocal agreement. This includes the draft protocols and guidelines for how the IFIT team has been proposed to operate. And Patrick, there you go. As Mr. Miyake stated, we are seeking council direction to prepare a resolution that will authorize execution of an interlocal agreement with our regional law enforcement partner agencies. To help present this item tonight, I've enlisted the assistance of Assistant Police Chief Patrick Arpin and our Police Legal Advisor, Melissa Chin. With that, I will now turn this over to Assistant Chief Arpin.
Thank you, Chief, and good evening, Mary Robinson, Council, and Mr. Miyake. As the Chief mentioned, you have all been provided with 2 documents that contain a lot of details on our ILA proposal and the proposed protocols and guidelines. I will give you a little background on how we got there, the impact of this agreement on our city and department, and respond to any questions you might have, and then respectfully ask you for your direction in this. As you may be aware, initiative I-9 was called I-940, and House Bill 1064 created the basis for the Law Enforcement Training and Community Safety Act. This act requires that all uses of deadly force by police that result in death, substantial bodily harm, or great bodily harm will be investigated completely independent of the involved agency. In response to the Law Enforcement Training and Community Safety Act, the Washington State Criminal Justice Training Center adopted rules for a completely independent investigation into officer-involved uses of force. The main focuses of these rules, which is the Washington Administrative Code 139-12, are independence, transparency, communication, and credibility. And some of the highlights of the rules are the addition of community representatives to the independent investigation team, which we'll talk a little bit more on the next slide. Training and experience requirements for the law enforcement team members, for example, basic homicide investigation, crime scene investigation, interrogation and interviewing techniques, etc. And those are all outlined in the protocols and guidelines document. Certification of the lead investigators, information about the role of the involved agency, and details regarding how the investigation information will be shared with the public. Now, we know that there will be a lot of questions, or maybe a lot of questions, on the requirements of non-law enforcement community representatives. So here's some additional information to consider. At least 2 non-law enforcement community representatives who have credibility and ties to the communities that are impacted directly by the deadly use of force incident will be part of the investigation. Our chiefs and sheriffs of each region are tasked with creating a transparent process of soliciting names and creating a roster of individuals willing to serve in this capacity. And it is quite a bit of time commitment. These rosters are provided to the independent investigations team, and the community representatives must be chosen from the list by the chiefs and or sheriffs. The role of the community representatives is to assess whether the process of the investigation is conducted in a trustworthy manner and complies with the standards laid out in the WAC Code 139-12 for independent investigations. This is accomplished by the roles that are laid out in state law. They are to participate directly in the vetting, interviewing, and or selection of the independent investigation team investigators. So that's the detectives actually doing the investigation. Review conflict of interest statements submitted within 72 hours of the commencement of each investigation by investigators. What that means is if there's an incident that occurs once the team is assigned, all the investigators working on that incident have to submit a conflict of interest statement, and that gets reviewed by the community reps as well as the command staff for the team. They would be present at the briefings with the involved agency's chief or sheriff. They are provided a copy of all press releases and communication to the media prior to the release of that information. And they review notification of any equipment use of the involved agency. Now, all the community reps, the non-law enforcement community reps, have to sign a confidentiality agreement. And that agreement remains in place until the prosecutor either declines to file charges or when the criminal case is finally concluded. And I want to ask Melissa, do you want to talk a little bit more about the legal requirements there?
Sure. Good evening. My name is Melissa Chin, Assistant City Attorney and Police Legal Advisor. A little bit of the code background. The Washington Administrative Code, which Assistant Chief Arpin already referenced, does require that the chiefs and sheriffs of each regional investigative team to create a transparent process in soliciting the names of the community reps that will be on the roster. And so the language of the WAC code was left intentionally broad by CJTC to allow for maximum flexibility for each community and agency to create a process specifically tailored to their unique needs and resources. For example, a large metropolitan area may have different needs and resources than a small town. And so the WAC code language was left intentionally broad to allow for that flexibility for the agencies. Chief, would you like to discuss our City of Bellevue selection process?
Yes, thank you, Melissa. So when we started examining this, we tried to figure out, okay, what's the best approach? And then we realized, hey, you know what? We have 7 advisory councils to the chief that really demonstrate the broad demographics of our community. And there's many people on these advisory councils. So to get a true cross-section of Bellevue, our initial approach was to go out and ask the advisory councils if they would have an interest in participating in this very important function. Unfortunately, we had one person express interest, and again, unfortunately, that person did not fill out the application. So when we exhausted that avenue, the next step for us was to put it out into the general public. And to date, we've had 6 people express interest, and I don't think that the deadline is passed yet for people to submit applications, but my hope is that we're going to get more. And then from there, we're going to start looking at the vetting process. What we're trying to accomplish is making sure that the members on these teams look like our community. Race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, again, just a cross-section of the Bellevue community. And hopefully we're going to be able to accomplish that. Patrick?
Thank you, Chief. So the purpose of the agreement is to satisfy the independent investigation requirement of the state law related to the use of deadly force. An independent investigation team is created when multiple law enforcement agencies enter into a written agreement to investigate police use of deadly force incidents in their geographical regions. The purpose of the independent investigation team is to determine whether the use of deadly force in that incident meets the good faith standard, which is established in RCW 9A16040, which regulates justifiable deadly use of force by law enforcement. The team will be made up of qualified and certified law enforcement investigators, civilian crime scene specialists, and as mentioned before, at least 2 non-law enforcement community representatives who operate completely independently. The interlocal agreement allows us to be part of the team and commits us to providing resources to that team. So the mission of IFIT KC is to perform the criminal investigations of an officer-involved incident where the use of deadly force by a peace officer results, again, in death, substantial bodily harm, or great bodily harm. This is separate from the internal investigation, the administrative investigation. But the results of the completed IFIT investigation will be available to the agencies for the internal investigation as is allowed by law. So their mission again is to conduct these investigations objectively, professionally, and consistently, utilizing principles that lead to enhanced public trust. Those principles of independence, transparency, communication, credibility of the process, and credibility of the investigators. It is also to apply the best practice methods for a thorough and complete criminal investigation, to maximize the availability and sharing of the latest technology, equipment, and techniques. Because I'm sure you're aware, not every agency has the same access to equipment as we might have, or King County might have, or one of the other agencies involved. Of course, to consolidate and share the skills of the most experienced and qualified commanders, supervisors, and investigators, and to conduct a thorough investigation in a timely manner. Now, this slide here simply shows all the counties in the state, and the counties that are in white currently do not have independence teams established. So there's just a handful that have not done that yet. You'll notice that King County, and it's right there in the middle, the top part of King County is white and the bottom is colored. And that's because South King County has the Valley investigative team that's already in place. This agreement is to establish a team for the North King County teams, primarily the east side of Seattle. So what does this mean for the Bellevue Police Department? Well, basically, state law now mandates how a deadly use of force incident will be investigated. Bellevue Police Department will not be involved in the investigation of their own use of force incidents. It needs to be an independent agency. Currently, and until this agreement is actually in place, we need to ask either King County Sheriff's Office or Seattle Police Department or Washington State Patrol to conduct and investigate a deadly use of force incident in Bellevue. And then we have to rely on their availability. And this can cause delays, which is what we actually recently saw in a shooting that was up in North King County here about a month ago. With the formation of this team, we will have the resources from all the member agencies available as determined to be needed for the investigation. The structure of the team kind of looks like this. There's an executive board that's made up of all the chiefs and sheriffs and our sheriff. They select a chairman of the board, the IFIT chair. There's a unit commander, 2 assistant commanders, an administrative commander who handles logistics around training, 5 investigative unit supervisors, that'd be like sergeants, 20 investigators at least, evidence technicians, and of course the 2 community representatives, and an incident commander that serves as a liaison between IFIT KC, the involved agency, and the prosecutor's office. It's important to note that IFIT KC is an investigative body and not a decision maker. The role of IFIT KC is to conduct an independent investigation to gather evidence for the prosecutor. The independent investigation is conducted in the same manner as a criminal investigation. Detectives are fact finders and evidence gatherers. The final work product of IFIT KC is forwarded to the King County Prosecutor's Office for the purpose of providing information for the prosecuting attorney's charging decision. And the prosecutor then decides or reviews all the facts and makes a charging decision. The role of IFIT KC is not to determine whether or not the deadly force was justified. That is the role of the prosecution. After a death occurs in the course of law enforcement duties, the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office receives materials from the law enforcement agency investigating the incident. The prosecutor makes a recommendation about whether an inquest should be held to the King County Executive, who then determines whether an inquest will be held. The inquest process in King County is to determine the facts that lead to the death after the inquest interrogatories are answered by the inquest panel. I know that's a lot, but they're really 2 different processes, but they certainly do overlap. So the list of the agencies that will be part of IFIT KCR: Washington State Patrol, Medina Police, Clyde Hill Police, the King County Sheriff's Office, Mercer Island Police, Kirkland Police, Issaquah Police, Redmond Police, the City of Duval Police Department, University of Washington Police, Lake Forest Park Police, and Snoqualmie North Bend Police, and of course, Bellevue. All these are listed in our ILA, and each of these agencies have collaborated on the development of the protocols and guidelines for the team, and they're all in the process of taking this ILA agreement to their respective councils. It is important to note that the Seattle Police Department is not a part of this team, and that is due to the regulations outlined in their Department of Justice consent decree. So as the chief mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, staff is seeking council direction to prepare a resolution that would authorize execution of an interlocal agreement with regional law enforcement agencies. So we thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for that presentation. I'll let you all have a time to comment or ask questions, and we'll go in this order: Deputy Mayor Newhouse, followed by Councilmember Barksdale, Lee, Zahn, Robertson, Stokes, and then me. So Deputy Mayor, you want to start us off?
All right, thanks, Mayor. First of all, Chief Milet, Assistant Chief Arpin, and Melissa, thank you for being here tonight. Thanks for the presentation. I guess, first of all, this is not all that different than somewhat the relationship that we have right now. If there was an incident in the city of Bellevue, I believe we have an agreement with either the city of Seattle or with King County that they would do an independent investigation. Is that correct?
So if we had a officer involved shooting tonight, yes, we would call on Seattle, King County, or State Patrol. We have mutual aid agreements on many different topics, and certainly we can call upon any one of our partner agencies on the east side to assist. Yes, sir.
Terrific. Thank you for that, Chief Millett. Second question is, how does this mesh with, as you're probably aware, this is somewhat of a hot topic down in Olympia, and the governor has indicated that he might want to have an independent office investigate use of force incidents, and also, and Joyce Nichols can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe there's a House bill, I believe it's 1089 currently, that's would direct the state auditor's office to review deadly force investigations to ensure a process that comply with state laws and regulations. How does this mesh, or is it too early to know how that might mesh if that were to pass?
So connectivity problems. You froze about midway through, but I think I got the gist of your question.
Okay.
So yes, the Olympia is looking at establishing a state-run investigative unit. Actually, I was talking to the president of the Washington Associations of Police Chiefs and Sheriffs right before our council meeting tonight to get an update. It's under consideration, and best guess that if it went through, we're looking about 2 to 3 years down the road before it was up and running. Until then, we need something to meet the standards of state law. And again, when an officer uses deadly force, that's the most serious decision they will make, and it calls for the utmost transparency. This helps fit that until the state decides whether or not they're going to move forward with a state investigative body. So that's it. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, you did. Thank you so much for that. And then lastly, I just want to touch on the non-law enforcement community representatives. Are we able to put in a prerequisite that they have an understanding of law enforcement? Perhaps they would have to have gone through the Citizen Academy, for example, in order to provide them with some context about protocols, best practices, and just the law enforcement in general. Is that a possibility that we could add that into this? And it sounds like, if I understood Melissa correctly, that is something that we could do.
So the state law is real broad, and I'm going to punt this over to Melissa in a second. It gives us a framework, but it also allows us some flexibility in certain areas, but I'm not sure if it would go that far. Melissa, what are your thoughts?
So the selection process language in the administrative code is broad to give each jurisdiction that flexibility to craft their screening process and selection process in a way that fits for their community. So if that is an issue that is important to this city, then it could be taken into consideration in the screening process.
And
However,
if I
that's
may,
a policy decision.
yeah, and if I may interject, training is part of the community representatives process. So we haven't quite developed what all that training is going to be.
Okay.
But there is definitely going to be training they'll need to take part in.
Okay, great. Because reading a lot of the language here, it is quite broad, and it does use a lot of broad descriptions of what's reasonable and what's not reasonable. Without that context of what our men and women might be, the situations that might be put in, they might not understand the context, and that's why I raise that issue. So thank you so much for answering those questions. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your question, sir.
Councilmember Barksdale.
Great, thank you, Mayor. I just want to respond first to the comment about the screening criteria. I think it's important to make sure we don't put barriers in place for equitable engagement in this body, and just want to make sure also that part of the reason for having the community members is because they're not part of law enforcement. So I think it's about finding the balance there. So I know that training is a part of it, but maybe not as part of becoming a member of the board, but like obviously maybe as a member of that group. Chief, I just had a question in terms of, you mentioned that you put it out to the 7 advisory boards and only got 1 applicant. Did you get any feedback around why, or like there was no?
No, sir. To my knowledge, we haven't received any. I take that back. I think there was 1 or 2 that said that they just didn't have time to do something like this. And then I didn't get any other responses. It's going to be something I'm going to dig into when I meet with each of the advisory councils to find out if there's something there that I'm not seeing.
And
Yeah.
Chief, if you might, I'll inject that one of the council member or advisory council members from the LGBTQ council actually did get back to me after we had made that decision, and he said he was going to apply. So,
oh, good.
We may have one of them.
Yeah, and it sounds like this is going to be a pretty big group, and only 2 community members. I guess, and was there any discussion around ways to bolster the community engagement and their voice in the process? Just thinking that's a lot of time that they're committing to the process.
It's requiring a minimum of 2. Doesn't say that we can't add more than that. And this is my vision for it, is to have representatives from each section of our community. And quite frankly, if we have a shooting in the African-American community or the Asian community, that the member that will be represented on that team will reflect the demographics of the individual that we encountered. Ideally, that's what I would like to see. I need to talk to the rest of the member agencies if we move forward with this to see if we're all on the same page. And I think we are.
Awesome. Last point, and then I'll hand it off if that's okay. I think having sort of an iterative process to continue to refine that community engagement as IFIT evolves would be useful to make sure that they feel like they're a part of the group and are having a meaningful impact. So,
thank you, Councilmember Barksdale. Councilmember Lee.
Thank you. Chief, to be representative, I assume that most likely it will be more than just 2 people, right? It depends on the situation, like you mentioned. Yes, and yeah, so you can decide, but you need to have people there to be, ready to do it. And when you do it, don't forget, remember senior citizen as well.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We will.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
My question is, we already handling this our own way, but this is a more formalized, more standard way of handling the situation. So you do think that's really the reason that we're doing this? It gives us additional, the benefit of having a more standard, formalized system that, can resort to other changes and resources and additional benefits.
I think so, sir. And I think what it all comes down to is ensuring the community has confidence in the process. And we used to have a program similar to this called K-CERT. And where that, in my opinion, and the former sheriff's opinion, where it fell short, it didn't mandate any specific experience or training for the detectives, and it also did not include a community member role in this. So I think this is actually building upon what we once had and just making it a better model. And it gives us a little bit more responsive, larger group of people pooled to draw from, as opposed to just to Seattle. Now, fortunately, knock on wood, we haven't had one of these in quite a long time. And God willing, we won't. But I really think that this team will be very effective for all of us.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Chief. I think it is so important to have this regional partnership and collaboration, to have the IFIT King County, so we're not creating our own little mini investigative teams. And I think that I heard you say that if there was something in one city, that others on the team would investigate so that there's no conflict of interest. And that is both the law enforcement on the team as well as the non-law enforcement community members we're talking about.
So the non-law enforcement community members have to be part of the community where the event happened.
Okay,
So,
I see.
And then the agency that's involved can have nothing nothing to do with the investigation, with the exception of maintaining control of the scene until the detective squad, the investigative team, can get there.
Okay, I see. So I agree with Councilmember Barksdale that, we want to make sure that there's training provided as part of being on this team, but I wouldn't want to advocate for that as one of the prerequisites. In fact, what I wondered about is as we develop this roster, a lot of times when we hear from the communities whose voices haven't been heard, volunteering can be a challenge because they are working. And so the ability to serve as a volunteer, so does it create an issue to offer a stipend of some kind, or is that just one of those no-nos that happens here? Because I do wonder about sometimes the ability of folks, if they're going to be spending a lot of hours volunteering their time, whether they even have the financial means to do that.
So the law does not provide that scenario. And I understand, yes, ma'am, it's a great point, but the only thing I could see becoming a conflict is the community member being accused of being in the pocket of the city because they're making money off of their role, and truly trying to create total independence from the community member position. But it's something we can definitely take a look at, and I can get back with you on that.
If you could, I think that's one of the challenges of how to make sure we have impartiality, but really make sure that there is not a barrier to participation on this team. So just something to think about. And then is youth allowed to be part of this team, or is there an age limit?
I think there's an age limit. 21. Melissa, is it 21?
Yeah.
Okay.
21.
Okay. And is there also a definition for what substantial bodily harm is? So we said that there were certain conditions that would be investigated. Are those clearly defined somewhere?
Yes.
If I have the definitions in front of me.
That.
Go ahead, Patrick, go ahead.
Okay.
I don't need to know what it is. I'm just wanting to make sure that there actually is a definition.
There is, and it's in the protocol, so you can find it in there. In the
protocols. And then, thank you. And then lastly, I'm wondering how the timeline for getting this launch fits in with our own timeline for the OIR use of force report that's supposed to be coming. There's a draft, and wondered if you could comment on that.
That's a great question, ma'am. So I think one other municipality has taken this to their city council, and I think the others are scheduled to bring it forward before their elected officials sometime in the next couple of weeks. I believe that the OIR report, and Mr. McCommon, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is scheduled to go out to the public sometime in the next week or two. I see them complementing each other. And, I know the final report to city council is probably a couple of, several weeks away. But at least in the discussions that I had during their review of our use of force, there was questions about the iFit team, and we provided them with all the documentation that we have. And I would expect that there'll probably be some mention of it in there. But again, I think they work in parallel and will complement each other in the end.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Zahn. Councilmember Robertson.
Thank you. I'll be brief. Thank you for the presentation tonight. I think that this is a really good thing. This is exactly the kind of thing that interlocal agreements are made for, because for us to have, for us to share with all these other cities the work of creating this infrastructure, this human infrastructure to do this work, is so much less expensive. It's so much more effective. We don't have a lot of use of force issues that will need investigation. It's not like we have one a month. I don't even know if we have one a year typically, or one every decade. So leveraging each other, and I think a lot of the agencies that we're partnering with are the same. So I think leveraging each other and doing it together is just wonderful, and I couldn't be more supportive. So the question we were asked tonight is, should this come back on
a resolution to pass it? Yes, I think it should. I'm happy if that comes back on consent, or I'm happy to talk about it again. I absolutely agree with some of the comments that my colleagues have made about making sure that we do get the community members who are really unbiased. I would not want anymore to have a widow of a police officer than I would to have someone who has been out, saying horrible things about all police, that we should have no police. We need to have the reasonable and prudent person, as we learned in law school, a reasonable community members who have no bias whatsoever, because that's who should be on there. So I'm glad you're doing outreach. I have personally seen the ads that you guys have been putting forward. So you guys are reaching people. You're putting them on social media. I've seen them on Nextdoor. I think that that's really great. And I hope that we do get some good community member applications. That said, we don't pay our boards and commissioners, and we get excellent, diverse boards and commission members. I don't think paying people, unless the state law said we had to, would be a good idea. I think we want to have volunteers who are only there because they want to serve their community. So that said, I'd love to see this come back. Thank you for being here.
If I could just add one thing, we routinely use force frequently in the course of our job, but not to the level that would prompt something like this. The IFA team, that hasn't happened frequently. At least.
Yeah, I meant deadly force where there would be substantial bodily injury or death under the law. So, I mean, that's not something, I think we haven't had a person die in custody of the city of Bellevue police, maybe ever. Yeah. And so, I mean, this is not something that happens frequently. And so I love that we're leveraging and partnering with our other East Side cities. I think that's great. So thanks.
Thank you, ma'am.
So Chief, I have a couple of questions. First of all, Patrick, I really appreciated the explanation of the role of these community members, because I wasn't quite sure. As I understand it, they actually don't have a decision-making role. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So maybe you can help me understand the benefit of having the community member if they're not making a decision on anything. And then the second question is, compared to the model that the state is outlining, they have a community member role in that. How does that role at the state level differ from the role at this proposed level?
So, and Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, they actually do have some decision-making roles. Number one, they help decide who comes onto the team as investigators. If there's conflicts of interest, they help to weigh in on that as well. But for the,
I think Chief froze up there.
or interview this, the community member saying collect that piece of evidence or interview that witness, or they don't do that, but they do have some decision making. And ma'am, I'm sorry, you froze up on that last part of your question about the difference between the state and us.
Well, I think you just answered
Go ahead,
it.
Patrick.
I was just going to add a little bit more. I mean, the community reps are really part of that transparency, and they're provided all this information. So they're the eyes and ears of the community on how that investigation is being conducted. They're given a privilege of hearing all the information that goes to the chief. So yeah, they don't have a role in the decision, but neither do the investigators on whether it's deadly force, was justified or not. They help provide the facts, but they do help create the team. So they do play a very important role in this.
Okay.
And the idea is when the community comes out and says, okay, was that really the way the cops are saying it happened, that the community member would be able to come forward and say, from their observation, their lenses, this is their impression of the investigation.
Okay. Right. So are you saying that the role at the state level is similar to the role at what we're proposing here with IFIT KC?
So there is no, again, to my knowledge, there is no team that's been formed at the state level yet. I would imagine when the state develops their team, there will be a civilian non-law enforcement component to it as well. But that is a work in progress in the legislature. And I anticipate something coming out in the next several months on it, a decision.
So Chief, what you were describing as a community member role of being able to help choose the the members of the panel or whatever. And then if there's a conflict of interest, that would be the role of a community member in the IFIT KC.
They actually help identify the detectives that will be on this team.
Okay.
And so
great.
they do interviews. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. Well, it sounds good to me. It really does. I support this. And I don't know if the rest of the council is ready to move this forward. I see Councilmember Barksdale with his hands up and Councilmember Stokes. So, and Councilmember Lee. So Councilmember Barksdale, let's start with you.
All right, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to just maybe bring back up the idea of maybe having something in there as an evaluation, team evaluation, to be able to make those continual improvements to this program.
Yes, sir.
So we can add that.
That's something we could include in this.
We'll have to go back to the other member agencies to make sure they're okay with inclusion of that. Now, the ILA will establish the team. Then in our protocols, we can put things in there and add things in there that may not appear in the ILA. And so I will get back with the proposed member agencies and see if this is something that they would be interested in adding.
Okay, if you need more details on what Councilmember Barksdale is talking about, I'm sure you guys can communicate. And
yes, ma'am.
Okay, let's see. We had Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, and since I didn't get to make comments yet, I'll go ahead and do that.
Oh, I'm
first.
sorry. I'm sorry.
All right.
Skipped you.
It's a long meeting.
Oh,
I mean, basically, this is a kind of a ministerial duty we're performing here because it's a state, we're conforming to state law, but there are nuances to it, and I think we've had a good discussion. I do want to point out that the role of the community people involved in this has to be something that is credible for both sides, and I just concerned we don't try to co-opt this person in terms of trying to figure out what their viewpoint is or anything else. I think in that, because that leads us down a line, down a path where then the community doesn't really have any confidence in the result that comes up. So it just causes more problems than it I think if you go too far on it, then it tries to resolve. So we have to be careful about that, and we have to respect that the community people will come forward and do their job, just as they will expect that the people who are also been appointed to this will do their job. And we're not asking for any test or whatever for the other members of the organization. So we have to keep that in balance. I mean, as part of this whole thing of being equitable and being having building up trust, and so that the decision making is really accepted from the community and from the public in general. And I think we can do that. We just don't need to go down that path too far, though, in terms of not wanting to, almost painting the community people as going to be biased before we even get into it. So that's my only really concern about the approach. But otherwise, I think it's a great thing that we're setting up, and great cooperation. Hopefully there won't be many times of this has to be put into effect. But I certainly support it, and we should bring it back on consent next time and have it in place.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Well, I think that would negate Councilmember Barksdale's request to discuss the kind of review process that he'd like to insert into that. So
it's okay.
I think on the table is asking them to take it back to the agency and see if any the other cities in the agreement are interested in including that, correct? Yeah. Okay. So Councilmember Lee, I believe you're next.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I said before many times, devil is in the detail. I believe, the chief is said very well, the benefit of having this program and how it's going to be administered. I think I trust him explicitly that, it's going to be conducted well. And I don't know whether, there's a way that we actually can I don't know, second guess him. In this case, I don't think I want to be. So I am very happy. I'm comfortable with the program. I'm ready to, approve to go with.
Approve as it is. Okay.
Yeah,
So
if Chief believes that whatever Councilmember Box they brought up, can be done. It's a good point. Excellent. There's no question about it. But it all depends on how it's going to be executed, right? You can put all the words there, unless there's a recourse that we don't. But in this case, you have other agencies to be involved. We have talked a lot of other stuff, and many things can go
I think
this way.
we can trust them to carry the idea forward and see what the response is. So I think there's a consensus to have you do that and then come back for another discussion.
Yes, ma'am.
At another meeting. So can I have some head nods to that if everybody's okay with that? All right, sounds good. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate it. And
thank you, ma'am.
I love your involvement in the community and involving the community in what you do. It makes us better as a city. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And I want to thank you, Patrick Arpin, Melissa Chin, and Major Forbush, who's recovering from shoulder surgery. They were instrumental in putting this presentation together. So thank you, everybody.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Miyake, the next thing is in our packets, regional issues, updates by Joyce.
Yes, yeah, Mayor and Councilmember, there are written reports. There were no presentations planned this evening, but we are open to any questions or comments on the reports that are in your packet this evening. So that, I'll turn it over to Joyce if there's any further introductory comment you'd like to make, Joyce.
I think that Mr. Miyake said it best. There's written information in your packet, and it's been kind of an interesting beginning at the state level because the session is being conducted mostly virtually. That's had a few glitches, but for the most part, it has gone off pretty well. And there's even been some floor action on some bills, which is good because the docket is crammed with bills. And because of the virtual format, things move in a slower pace in the committee. There's one blessing for the new process, and that is that the format that they're using, the virtual format, doesn't allow a committee chair to go over the time allotted for that hearing or that meeting. So they end on time, which is good because that way you don't get backed up. There's also a provision for people to provide written testimony to the committee on a bill that was heard within 24 hours of the end of that hearing. And that's an advantage because people all across the state don't have to be traveling to Olympia to get their opinions and their voices heard. So there are some pluses and minuses to this. I'll just quickly say that transportation funding has taken kind of center stage the last couple of weeks. And the House Transportation Committee Chair, Jake Fye, introduced his transportation package. And that's a proposal that totals $26 billion over the next 16 years. It would be the largest transportation package in state history. The last package was passed in 2015. And it uses a combination of gas tax increases, vehicle and weight fee increases, a phased fee on carbon emissions that would increase over time. And there's a couple of interesting things about this proposal because the revenue, they're not proposing to bond against the revenue. Most of the packages have allowed bonding, which gives you more money up front. This will be more of a pay-as-you-go plan if it's adopted that way. One thing that we have been trying to accomplish for years is to get the gas tax indexed to inflation so that over time it stays pretty much even with what the cost of living increases are. That is part of the proposal, and I'm not sure it'll hang all the way through, but it is certainly something that we've been trying to get for years. A feature of the House proposal is there are no specific projects listed. As the package moves through and people express support for the package, a project list will evolve. And we'll be working to get our priorities that we've worked on with the Bellevue Chamber in front of the committees that are going to be working on that. And then as the corollary, Senator Steve Hobbs is, he's the chair of the Senate Transportation Committee. He has a work session scheduled on Thursday of this week, and he's going to be releasing his transportation proposal, which is the Senate Democrat proposal. We don't know much about his. We'll find out about it on Thursday. And then we'll be able to tell how similar or different the two proposals are. And then you start figuring out how they're going to mesh and who's going to support what and how different projects will get on that list. So the real work starts once the packages are out there. And then another notable thing is last Friday, the Senate and House Democrats introduced their, quote, early action budget. And those proposals total $2.2 billion in distribution of federal aid that was passed by Congress in December as part of the last COVID-19 pandemic stimulus package. And that proposal is slated for early action because there is consensus that they want to get that money out as fast as possible to help with things like rental assistance, helping people avoid eviction, small business grants, money for the superintendent of public instruction to use to help school districts get their plans updated for getting kids back into school. And there's a very, very good summary of it that I can send to you if you want the actual details. Staff's working now to set up meetings between now and February 15th so that council members can talk to legislators about what our priorities are and talk about the different interests that the city has. So we'll be working with your calendars to see where and when we can get time to do that. The first cutoff is February 15th, and that's the first deadline in a whole series that will march us through all the way to the end of the session in late April. And we will be providing you updates on what's going on, similar to the one that was in your packet. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to call me. The lateness of the meeting tonight kind of begs the question of, just let me know if you have questions. I'm happy to get back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. Any pressing questions or comments tonight? You know how to find Joyce, and we're all looking forward to working with you, Joyce, on these issues. So thank you. All right, I think we've come to the end of our meeting. Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. And Deputy Mary, thank you for stepping in for me tonight. I really appreciated it.
My pleasure.
All right, good night, everybody.
Night.